Every calm face you see during the day may be hiding a mind that almost collapsed in silence. When the lights go low, when the body finally stops moving, when the world no longer gives you something to fix, the mind begins to wander into places you thought you had left behind. One thought becomes 10, one worry becomes a storm, one memory opens another, and suddenly you are not resting. You are fighting invisible battles inside your own head. A spiral does not always begin loudly. Sometimes it begins with one small question. What if it happens again? What if I made the wrong choice? What if I am not strong enough? What if the past never leaves me? And before you notice it, the brain starts building a whole prison from thoughts that were never facts. Not because you are weak, but because your mind has been trained to survive, not to be still. We were taught to keep going, to hold everything in, to smile while carrying fear, to stay busy so we do not have to feel what is underneath. But there is a deeper part of you that is tired of running in circles. A wiser part that no longer wants more noise, more pressure, more panic, or more control. It wants space. It wants silence. It wants to breathe without turning every thought into a warning. The Stoics understood this battle. They knew the mind becomes heavy when it tries to control what was never in its hands. They believed peace begins when you stop chasing every fear, stop answering every thought, and stop treating every emotion like an order. To them, freedom was not the absence of pain. It was the ability to stand still inside yourself while pain passed through without becoming your master. Tonight, this is the reset your mind has been asking for. 4 hours to step away from the spiral. 4 hours to loosen the grip of fear. 4 hours to stop arguing with the past, stop rehearsing the future, and return to the only place life can truly meet you, the present moment. Because your brain does not need another battle tonight. It needs stillness. It needs distance. It needs to remember that not every thought deserves your attention. Not every fear deserves your obedience, and not every storm inside you is strong enough to carry you away. Tonight, you are not here to chase peace. You are here to practice it. And before the mind can become still, it must first learn to notice the doorway into unrest. Because no spiral begins as a storm. It begins as a small shift inside you, a quiet tightening, a sudden pull, a thought that knocks once, then keeps knocking until you open the door. And if you do not see that first moment clearly, the mind carries you away before you even realize you have left yourself. There is a moment before every spiral begins that most people miss. It is so quiet that it does not feel dangerous. It may come while you are lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. It may come after a message is left unanswered. It may come after someone speaks to you with a different tone than usual. It may come when the room becomes too silent, when the body is tired, when the heart is carrying more than it has admitted. At first, nothing dramatic happens. There is only a small movement inside the mind. A question, a fear, a memory, a meaning you attach to something before you have enough truth to understand it. That hidden moment is important because it is the place where freedom still exists. Once the spiral grows, the mind begins to run on its own. It gathers old pain, future fear, unfinished conversations, shame, regret, and doubt. It does not ask permission. It simply starts connecting one thing to another until you feel surrounded by thoughts. But before all that happens, there is a narrow space, a small pause, a place where you can still choose not to follow the first thought into the dark. Most people do not lose peace because of what happens outside them. They lose peace because of the meaning their mind gives to what happens. Someone becomes quiet, and the mind says, "They are upset with me." A plan changes, and the mind says, "Everything is falling apart." A memory returns, and the mind says, "You have not healed at all." A mistake happens, and the mind says, "This proves something is wrong with you." The event may be small, but the story becomes heavy. And the moment the story feels real, the spiral begins. The Stoics understood this very deeply. They knew that what disturbs a person is not only the event, but the judgment placed on the event. The mind does not simply see life. It interprets life. It adds meaning. It adds fear. It adds old wounds. It adds predictions. And if a person never learns to question that first interpretation, the mind becomes a servant of every passing impression. One thought arrives, and you obey. One fear rises, and you follow. One memory opens, and you enter it as if it is happening again. But the first thought is not always wisdom. Sometimes it is only fear wearing the voice of truth. Sometimes it is old pain trying to protect you from something that is not actually happening. Sometimes it is exhaustion speaking in a serious tone. Sometimes it is the nervous system saying, "I have seen pain before, so I must prepare for it again." And if you believe that voice too quickly, your body reacts before your higher mind can speak. This is why spirals often begin in the body before they become clear in thought. The jaw tightens. The chest feels heavy. The stomach turns. The breathing becomes shallow. The eyes search for proof of danger. The hands reach for the phone. The mind starts scanning old messages, old memories, old mistakes, old warnings. It feels like thinking, but it is really alarm. It feels like problem solving, but it is really fear looking for a reason to stay awake. That first body signal is not your enemy. It is a bell. It is telling you that something inside you has been touched, not destroyed, not defeated, only touched. There is a difference. A spiral begins when you treat the bell as a command instead of a signal. You feel fear, so you assume danger. You feel sadness, so you assume weakness. You feel doubt, so you assume truth has arrived. But feelings are not always instructions. Sometimes they are only weather passing through the mind. The hidden moment before a spiral begins is the moment you can say, "Something in me is reacting." Not, "Everything is wrong." Not, "I am losing control." Not, "This will never end." Just, "Something in me is reacting." That one sentence creates distance. It places you back in the seat of the observer. It reminds you that you are not the thought itself. You are the one noticing the thought. And what you can notice, you do not have to become. This is where the Stoic reset begins. Not with forcing yourself to be calm. Not with pretending that pain is not there. Not with shaming yourself for overthinking. It begins with seeing the first spark before it becomes a fire. It begins with watching the mind carefully, the way a wise guard watches the gate at night. Not every visitor deserves to enter. Not every thought deserves a room. Not every fear deserves your full attention. A spiral feeds on speed. The faster you follow the thought, the stronger it becomes. It wants you to rush. It wants you to answer immediately. It wants you to explain, defend, predict, remember, and solve everything at once. But wisdom moves slower. Stoicism teaches the power of delay, not denial. Delay. A pause before reaction. A breath before belief. A moment before surrender. Because the mind that can pause has already begun to free itself. The first pause may feel small, but it changes everything. When a worrying thought rises, you do not have to wrestle it. You can look at it gently and ask, "Is this true, or is this fear trying to complete a story?" When an old memory returns, you can ask, "Is this happening now, or is my mind replaying something that has already passed?" When the future begins to look dark, you can ask, "Do I know this, or am I imagining pain ahead of time?" These questions do not erase emotion, but they weaken the spell around it. Many people think spiraling means they need more answers, but often what the brain needs is less fuel. It does not need another hour of mental debate. It does not need to replay the same conversation from 12 different angles. It does not need to build 10 possible endings to a problem that has not arrived. It needs stillness long enough to realize that not every thought is urgent. Some thoughts are only noise. Some fears are only echoes. Some worries are only the mind trying to feel in control of what it cannot control. The rare skill is learning to catch the mind before it starts gathering evidence for fear. Because once fear takes the lead, it becomes very convincing. It remembers every time something went wrong. It forgets every time you survived. It points to every sign of danger. It ignores every sign of safety. It speaks with confidence, but confidence is not the same as truth. A terrified mind can sound certain and still be wrong. This is why the hidden moment matters so much. It is the moment before fear becomes a lawyer, building a case against your peace. It is the moment before one thought becomes a whole court trial inside your head. It is the moment before you start proving to yourself that you should be afraid. If you can catch that moment, you do not have to attend the trial. You can step outside. You can return to the breath. You can return to the body. You can return to what is actually here. And what is usually here is simpler than the mind says. A room, a bed, a breath, a tired body, a thought passing through, a feeling asking for attention, a heart that needs kindness, not another battle. The spiral says, solve your whole life tonight. Stillness says, come back to this one moment. The spiral says, believe the worst so you can be ready. Wisdom says, see clearly before you surrender your peace. The spiral says, you are trapped. The Stoic mind says, I can choose my next response. This does not mean you will never feel fear again. It means fear will no longer enter without being seen. It means the first thought will no longer drag you blindly into the second, third, and fourth. It means you will begin to notice the early signs, the tightening, the rushing, the need to check, the urge to assume, the hunger for certainty. And once you can notice these signs, you are no longer helpless before them. Tonight, as this reset begins, do not wait for the spiral to become loud before you return to yourself. Listen for the small shift, the first pull, the quiet sentence that tries to lead you away from peace. Meet it there, not with anger, not with panic, not with shame. Meet it with awareness. Say to yourself, I see what is beginning. That is not weakness, that is mastery. Because the mind that sees the beginning of a spiral has already changed the ending. And once you begin to see the first doorway into a spiral, another truth becomes clear. The mind does not only spiral because a thought appears, it spirals because the same thought keeps returning until it starts to feel like truth. A lie whispered once can be ignored, but a lie repeated every night can begin to sound like your own wisdom. This is where many people lose the battle quietly, not because the thought is true, but because it has visited them so often that they stop questioning it. There is a strange pain in hearing the same thought again and again. At first, it may feel like a warning. Then it becomes a concern. Then it becomes a belief. Then, one day, it becomes part of your identity. A person does not wake up suddenly believing they are not enough. That belief is usually built slowly. A small failure here, a harsh word there, a disappointment that stayed too long, a rejection that the mind kept replaying, and after a while the brain begins to say, this keeps coming back, so it must mean something. But repetition is not truth. Repetition is only familiarity. This is one of the deepest traps of the human mind. The brain begins to trust what it has heard often, even when what it has heard is painful, incomplete, or completely false. If you keep telling yourself that something will go wrong, the thought may start to feel responsible. If you keep replaying a mistake, the mistake may begin to feel like your whole character. If you keep returning to an old wound, the wound may begin to feel like a prophecy. But the fact that a thought returns does not mean it is wise. Some thoughts return because they were never examined. Some return because they were fed by fear. Some return because your mind thinks repeating pain will somehow protect you from feeling it again. The Stoics understood that the mind is shaped by what it practices. A person who practices anger becomes quicker to anger. A person who practices fear becomes quicker to fear. A person who practices suspicion begins to see danger even where there is only silence. This is not because the world has changed. It is because the inner habit has become strong. The mind walks the same road so many times that it no longer asks where the road is going, it simply follows. This is why repeated thoughts can feel so powerful. The brain likes paths it knows. Even if the path hurts, it can still feel safer than a new one. A familiar fear can feel more believable than an unfamiliar peace. A familiar sadness can feel more real than a quiet moment of hope. A familiar self-criticism can feel more honest than kindness. And this is why many people resist calm without knowing it. Calm feels new, fear feels known, and the mind often mistakes what is known for what is true. A spiral becomes dangerous when the brain begins collecting repetition as evidence. You think about someone leaving you again and again, then you begin to believe abandonment is certain. You think about failing again and again, then success begins to feel impossible. You think about one embarrassing moment again and again, then you start believing everyone remembers it as clearly as you do. But they do not. Most people are busy carrying their own storms. The mind only makes your fear feel huge because it keeps placing it under a bright light. What repeats inside you often becomes louder than what is actually happening around you. This is why a person can be safe in a quiet room and still feel in danger. The danger is not in the room. It is in the repeated message running through the mind. Something is wrong. You should be worried. You are behind. You are not healed. You are not loved. You cannot rest yet. The words may change, but the pattern is the same. A thought comes back so many times that your body begins to respond as if it has received a command from reality. But reality is patient. Reality does not need to shout. Fear shouts because it wants control. Truth can stand still. The Stoic way is not to fight every repeated thought with force. That only gives the thought more importance. When you wrestle a thought every time it appears, you train the mind to treat it like an emergency. The wiser path is to observe it with calm distance, to notice, this is the old thought again, not, this is my truth, not, this is who I am, not, this is what will happen, just, this is a repeated pattern. That small change removes the crown from the thought. It is no longer a king giving orders. It is only an old visitor at the door. There is power in saying, I have heard this before. Those words may sound simple, but they create space. They remind you that the thought is not new information. It is not a revelation. It is not a final answer. It is a familiar mental echo returning to be believed again. And when you recognize it as an echo, you do not have to bow to it. Many spirals survive because the mind keeps asking questions it has already answered. What if I am not enough? What if I never recover? What if I made the wrong choice? What if they secretly hate me? These questions pretend to seek clarity, but often they are only fear wearing the mask of curiosity. Real questions bring you closer to wisdom. Fear-based questions drag you back into the same dark circle. They do not open a door, they build a cage. This does not mean all repeated thoughts should be ignored. Some thoughts return because something needs attention. A boundary may need to be set. A grief may need to be honored. A decision may need to be made. A truth may need to be faced. But there is a difference between a thought that returns with guidance and a thought that returns with punishment. Guidance feels firm, but it does not destroy you. Punishment feels urgent, heavy, and cruel. Guidance points toward action. Punishment traps you in shame. Guidance brings clarity. Punishment brings another hour of mental noise. This is where the Stoic reset teaches discernment. You begin to ask, is this thought helping me see clearly, or is it only making me suffer again? A useful thought may be uncomfortable, but it gives direction. A destructive thought only repeats the wound without offering a way forward. It tells you what is wrong, but never what is wise. It accuses, but never heals. It points backward, but never teaches you how to stand. The brain mistakes repetition for truth because repeated thoughts become emotionally familiar. The body begins to recognize the feeling before the mind checks the facts. This is why old fear can rise so quickly. The body says, I know this feeling. The mind then rushes to explain it. It searches for a reason. It finds one, then another, and suddenly a feeling becomes a story, and the story becomes a spiral. But the feeling came first. The story came after. To break this, you must slow down the moment of belief. Not every thought needs to be answered immediately. Not every fear needs a full investigation. Not every memory deserves to become tonight's ruler. When the repeated thought appears, let it appear. But do not feed it with panic. Do not decorate it with more details. Do not build a future around it. Breathe, and let your mind say, this is familiar, but familiar is not final. That sentence can become a key. Familiar is not final. What you have thought many times does not have to become what you think forever. The road your mind has walked for years can be left. The old sentence can lose strength. The old fear can become quieter. The old belief can be questioned. The brain can learn new paths, but it learns them through practice, not pressure. Peace becomes familiar the same way fear became familiar, by returning to it again and again. At first, calm may feel unnatural. You may catch yourself reaching for worry, the way a hand reaches for something it has held for years. The absence of panic may feel strange. The quiet may feel too open. The mind may even ask, shouldn't I be thinking about this more? But this is only the old habit trying to survive. It wants to pull you back into the known, and each time you refuse to follow it, you teach your mind that safety does not have to look like overthinking. The Stoics would remind you that you are not required to agree with every impression. A thought can knock. You do not have to invite it in. A fear can repeat. You do not have to call it truth. A memory can return. You do not have to rebuild your life around it. The power is not in stopping every thought from appearing. The power is in no longer kneeling before a thought simply because it came back. Tonight, as your mind enters this reset, listen carefully to what repeats inside you, not with fear, not with shame. Listen like someone finally ready to understand the pattern without becoming trapped inside it. Some thoughts have been repeated for years, but they were never truly true. They were only practiced. They were only familiar. They were only old pain speaking with confidence. And now, a new practice can begin. The practice of questioning what once controlled you. The practice of letting a repeated fear pass without feeding it. The practice of choosing truth over familiarity. Because the mind that stops mistaking repetition for truth does not need to spiral the same way again. It can hear the old thought return and remain free. And when you stop mistaking repetition for truth, something deeper becomes possible. You begin to understand that the mind does not need to finish every fear before it can be free. It only needs one sacred interruption, one calm break in the pattern, One moment where you refuse to fall all the way down with the thought. Because inner collapse is rarely one giant fall. It is usually a series of small permissions you give to fear without noticing. There is a private moment when a person begins to fall inward. The face may still look normal. The room may still be quiet. Nothing outside may have changed, but inside the ground begins to move. The heart sinks. The thoughts speed up. The body becomes alert. The mind starts reaching for every painful explanation it can find. And if nothing interrupts it, the person slowly disappears into the storm. This is why the Stoic art of interruption is so powerful. It does not wait until the mind is completely overwhelmed. It steps in while the collapse is still forming. It meets the spiral before it becomes a cage. It places a hand on the inner door and says, "Not this way, not again, not tonight." Most people think peace means never breaking down. But the Stoics were wiser than that. They knew that a human being will feel pressure. A human being will feel fear. A human being will sometimes tremble beneath the weight of life. The goal is not to become stone. The goal is to become steady enough to notice when the mind is leaving wisdom and entering panic. Inner collapse begins when the mind forgets its own power. It starts believing that every feeling is final, every fear is a message, every painful thought is a command. It stops observing and starts drowning. It stops asking what is true and starts obeying what is loud. And once the mind gives fear the seat of authority, even small things begin to feel impossible. A delayed reply feels like rejection. A hard day feels like a ruined life. A mistake feels like proof that you cannot be trusted. A memory feels like a sentence. A tired body feels like a failing spirit. This is how collapse begins, not because the world has ended, but because the mind has lost the distance needed to see clearly. The Stoic interruption begins with one quiet act. Separate yourself from the storm. Do not say, "I am falling apart." Say, "A wave is moving through me." Do not say, "I cannot handle this." Say, "My mind is under pressure right now." Do not say, "Everything is wrong." Say, "Something in me feels unsafe." These sentences may look simple, but they are not small. They move you from being inside the fire to standing near it. They create the first inch of freedom. And sometimes 1 inch is enough for the soul to breathe. The mind collapses faster when it uses absolute words. Always, never, everything, nothing, everyone, no one. These words are heavy stones. They make a moment feel like a lifetime. They turn a passing emotion into a final verdict. When the mind says, "Nothing ever works for me," it is no longer speaking truth. It is speaking from exhaustion. When it says, "I always ruin things," it is not offering wisdom. It is repeating a wound. When it says, "No one cares," it may not be reporting reality. It may be expressing pain that needs comfort, not obedience. The Stoic does not bow to absolute language. The Stoic softens it back into truth. Not, "Everything is falling apart, but this part of my life feels difficult." Not, "I never get peace, but peace feels far from me tonight." Not, "I am broken, but I am hurting." Not, "I cannot survive this, but this moment is painful, and I must meet it one breath at a time." This is not pretending. This is accuracy, and accuracy is medicine for a spiraling mind. Panic exaggerates. Wisdom clarifies. Fear makes life feel larger and darker than it is. Stoicism returns the mind to the size of the actual moment. To interrupt inner collapse, you must stop feeding the mind dramatic conclusions. The brain may offer them because drama creates a false sense of control. If the mind can name the worst possible outcome, it feels prepared. If it can blame you completely, it feels like it has found the reason. If it can predict disaster, It feels like it has protected you, but many times the mind is not protecting you. It is exhausting you in advance. A Stoic reset asks you to return to what is within reach, not the whole future, not the entire past, not every possible meaning, just this breath, this body, this choice, this next calm response. Inner collapse becomes stronger when you try to carry too much time at once. You carry yesterday's regret, tomorrow's fear, next year's uncertainty, and tonight's loneliness in the same mind. No wonder the soul becomes tired. No human being was built to live in every moment at the same time. The Stoics called the present moment the only place where your power lives. You cannot edit yesterday. You cannot control tomorrow. You cannot force another person's heart. You cannot undo what has already happened by punishing yourself again. But you can decide what you do with the thought that is standing before you now. You can decide whether to follow it, question it, soften it, or let it pass. This is where interruption becomes an art. It is not violent. It is not harsh. It does not attack the mind for being afraid. It simply changes the direction of attention. When the mind says, "Follow me into the worst story," you gently bring it back to the truth of the present. When the mind says, "Solve everything now," you remind it, "Only the next step is mine." When the mind says, "You are not safe unless you keep thinking," you answer, "Thinking is not the same as safety." There are times when the interruption must be physical before it can be mental. A spiraling mind often needs the body to become an anchor. Place your feet on the floor. Notice the weight of your body. Relax the jaw. Unclench the hands. Slow the breath without forcing it. Let the shoulders drop as if you are putting down a burden you were never asked to carry forever. The body tells the brain what words sometimes cannot. It says, "We are here. We are not in the memory. We are not in the disaster. We are here." This is not a trick. It is a return. The mind collapses when it loses contact with what is real. It travels into a feared future, an old wound, a painful assumption, or a story that has not been proven. The body brings it back. The breath brings it back. The room brings it back. The present brings it back. And when the mind returns, even slightly, the spiral loses some of its strength. Another powerful interruption is silence without surrender. Many people are silent while still arguing inside. They are quiet outside but fighting an entire war within. Stoic silence is different. It is the silence of refusal. Refusing to chase every thought. Refusing to answer fear's questions. Refusing to rehearse the same pain again. Refusing to turn one feeling into a full identity. You do not have to respond to every thought the mind produces. Some thoughts are only sparks. If you leave them alone, they go out. But if you bend down, study them, breathe panic into them, and keep turning them over, they become fire. The art is knowing which thoughts deserve attention and which ones only want fuel. A thought that calls you back to responsibility deserves attention. A thought that calls you into shame deserves distance. A thought that helps you make a wise choice deserves space. A thought that only repeats fear without direction deserves release. A thought that brings humility can teach you. A thought that crushes your spirit is not your teacher. It is pain speaking without wisdom. This is why interruption must be gentle but firm. You are not trying to destroy the mind. You are training it. You are teaching it that fear can appear without becoming king. You are teaching it that pain can rise without becoming law. You are teaching it that one dark moment does not get to define the whole night. The Stoics practice this by remembering what belongs to them and what does not. Your effort belongs to you. Your response belongs to you. Your honesty belongs to you. Your discipline belongs to you. Your choice to pause belongs to you. But another person's opinion, the past, the future, the sudden turns of life, and the mood of the world do not fully belong to you. Inner collapse often begins when you try to control what was never placed in your hands. So the interruption becomes this question: what is mine right now? Not what is frightening, not what is unfair, not what could happen. What is mine? Maybe what is mine is to breathe. Maybe what is mine is to stop checking. Maybe what is mine is to rest. Maybe what is mine is to wait until morning before deciding. Maybe what is mine is to forgive myself for being human. Maybe what is mine is to let the thought pass without building a home around it. That question brings the mind back from the edge. It cuts away the extra weight. It reminds you that you are not responsible for carrying the whole universe inside your chest. You are responsible for the next wise movement of your own soul. And sometimes the wisest movement is not movement at all. It is staying still long enough for the wave to pass. A collapsing mind wants immediate action. Send the message. Make the decision. Check again. Explain yourself. Defend yourself. Escape the feeling. Find certainty. But not every urgent feeling deserves an urgent response. Many of the choices people regret were made in the heat of an inner collapse. The Stoic learns to wait, not forever, just long enough for wisdom to return. There is deep strength in saying, I will not decide from this state. There is freedom in saying, I will not speak while fear is holding my tongue. There is maturity in saying, I will not use panic as a guide. That pause can save relationships, protect dignity, and keep a tired mind from creating more pain than the original problem. The art of interrupting inner collapse is really the art of returning to leadership within yourself. Not controlling everything, not denying emotion, not becoming cold, but becoming the calm authority inside your own life. The one who says, I hear the fear, but it will not drive. The one who says, I feel the pain, but it will not choose my response. The one who says, this moment is hard, but I am still here. And that is where the reset deepens. First, you learn to see the hidden moment before the spiral begins. Then you learn that repetition is not truth. Now you learn that even when the mind starts to fall, the fall can be interrupted. The pattern can be broken. The old road can be left. The collapse can become a pause, and the pause can become power. Tonight, do not wait until your mind is drowning before you reach for stillness. Step in early, interrupt gently, return to what is real. Let the breath become a doorway. Let the body become an anchor. Let the present become a shelter. And let the old storm discover that you are no longer as easy to carry away. Because the mind that can interrupt its own collapse has already begun to rebuild itself. And once you learn to interrupt inner collapse, the next skill is even more delicate. You must learn to sense the movement before it becomes too strong. Because emotion is not still. It travels. It gathers speed. It begins as a small inner wave, then becomes a current, then becomes something that can carry your whole mind away if you do not notice it early. The wise person does not wait until emotion owns the room. The wise person learns to feel it approaching. There is a point where an emotion is still soft enough to be guided. This is the point most people overlook. They wait until anger has already taken their voice, until fear has already chosen the meaning, until sadness has already closed the curtains inside them, until shame has already told them who they are. But by then, the emotion has gained momentum. It has collected memories, words, old wounds, body tension, and mental pictures. It has become stronger than the original feeling. And once an emotion has gathered enough speed, it no longer feels like something passing through you. It feels like something becoming you. Emotional momentum begins quietly. It may start as a small discomfort in the chest, a little heat in the face, a heaviness behind the eyes, a pressure in the throat, a sudden need to explain yourself, a sudden need to withdraw, a sudden need to prove something, a sudden need to check, reply, argue, defend, or disappear. These small signals may not look important, but they are the first steps of the emotion putting on its shoes. The mistake many people make is that they only notice emotion when it becomes loud. They say, "I suddenly became angry." But anger was not sudden, it was building. They say, "I suddenly became anxious." But anxiety had already been gathering little pieces of fear. They say, "I suddenly broke down." But the mind had been carrying pressure long before the tears came. What feels sudden is often only the moment we finally notice what has been moving inside us for a while. The Stoic does not hate emotion. The Stoic studies it, not coldly, not harshly, but with respect and attention, because anything that can take control of your words, your choices, your sleep, and your peace deserves to be understood. Emotion is not the enemy. Unseen emotion is the danger. An emotion that is seen early can become information. An emotion that is ignored too long can become a ruler. This is why awareness must come before control. You cannot guide what you refuse to notice. You cannot slow down what you pretend is not moving. You cannot calm a storm while denying there are clouds. The first wisdom is honesty. I am becoming afraid. I am becoming defensive. I am becoming hurt. I am becoming restless. Not, I am weak. Not, I should not feel this. Not, something is wrong with me. Just the clean truth. Something is rising. Those words are powerful because they catch the emotion while it is still becoming. They do not wait for it to become your whole identity. There is a great difference between saying, "I am angry," and saying, "Anger is rising in me." One traps you inside the emotion. The other gives you space around it. One makes the feeling sound like your whole self. The other reminds you that the feeling is a movement passing through your inner world. The Stoics believed that impressions arrive before judgment. Something happens, and the mind receives an impression, a tone, a look, a memory, a delay, a problem, a silence. Then the mind begins to judge it. This is disrespect. This is danger. This is rejection. This is failure. This is proof. Once the judgment attaches itself to the feeling, momentum increases. The emotion says, "Now we know what this means," and the body follows. But many times the first meaning is not the true meaning. It is only the fastest meaning. And the fastest meaning often comes from pain, not wisdom. A person who has been ignored before may see silence as abandonment. A person who has been judged before may hear correction as rejection. A person who has lived through disappointment may see uncertainty as a warning. The present moment becomes mixed with old history. The emotion gains speed because it is no longer reacting only to now. It is dragging yesterday into this moment. To recognize emotional momentum, you must learn your personal early signs. Everyone has them. Some people become quiet when they are hurt. Some become sharp. Some start explaining too much. Some start checking their phone. Some start cleaning, scrolling, eating, pacing, or rehearsing conversations that have not happened. Some begin to feel a strong need to be right. Some begin to feel a strong need to escape. These signs are not random. They are the footprints of emotion. When you know your signs, you no longer have to be surprised by yourself. You begin to see the pattern before it takes over. You can say, "When I start replaying the same sentence, I am usually entering fear. When I want to send a long message immediately, I am usually trying to calm discomfort through control. When I withdraw completely, I may be protecting a wound instead of choosing peace." This kind of self-knowledge is not weakness, it is inner leadership. A person who does not know their emotional momentum becomes controlled by timing. If the feeling comes at night, it owns the night. If it comes during conflict, it owns the words. If it comes during tiredness, it owns the interpretation. But a person who understands the build-up can step aside before the feeling becomes too powerful. They can delay the reply. They can breathe before speaking. They can rest before deciding. They can admit, "This is not the right state to judge my life from." That sentence can save you from many painful choices. Never judge your whole life from a heated mind. Never judge your worth from a wounded hour. Never judge your future from a tired body. Never judge someone's heart only from your fear of losing them. Emotional momentum narrows the mind. It removes balance. It makes one side of the story feel like the whole story. It makes one feeling feel like the final answer. This is why the Stoic waits for clarity before giving emotion authority. Waiting does not mean suppressing. Suppression pushes emotion into the dark, where it grows in hidden ways. Stoic waiting is different. It is a calm holding. You allow the emotion to exist, but you do not allow it to command. You feel the heat, but you do not throw the fire. You feel the fear, but you do not let fear write the message. You feel the sadness, but you do not let sadness define the whole meaning of your life. This is a rare skill because modern life rewards quick reaction. Reply quickly, decide quickly, defend quickly, post quickly, prove quickly. But the soul does not heal quickly. Wisdom does not rise in panic. Clarity does not speak well while the nervous system is rushing. Some of the most powerful moments in life happen when you refuse to move at the speed of your emotion. There is a quiet dignity in pausing. When emotion begins to gather speed, pause your body first. The body is the doorway back to the mind. Slow your hands. Relax your shoulders. Let your tongue rest. Breathe lower. Feel your feet. Notice where the emotion lives. Is it in the chest, the stomach, the throat, the forehead? Do not make a story yet. Just locate it. When you locate emotion in the body, you stop letting it take over the whole world. It becomes a sensation, not a sentence. Then name it with simple words. This is fear. This is hurt. This is pressure. This is disappointment. Naming is not weakness. Naming is how you turn a storm into something you can hold. A nameless emotion spreads everywhere. A named emotion becomes clearer, and what becomes clearer becomes less dangerous. The next step is to separate the feeling from the action it wants. Fear may want you to control. Anger may want you to attack. Shame may want you to hide. Sadness may want you to give up. Jealousy may want you to compare. But you are not required to do what the emotion suggests. An emotion can knock on the door of action, but you do not have to open it. You can say, "I feel this, but I will not act from this." That is the heart of Stoic strength. Not the absence of emotion, but the refusal to become its servant. Emotional momentum owns you when it makes you forget your values. You say things you do not mean. You break promises to yourself. You return to habits that weaken you. You treat a temporary feeling like a permanent guide. You let one emotional wave choose what your calmer self would never choose. To prevent this, you must know what kind of person you want to be before the emotion arrives. Because when the feeling is strong, you will not rise to your wishes. You will return to your training. Train yourself now. Decide now. When I am angry, I will not insult. When I am afraid, I will not assume. When I am hurt, I will not beg for peace from someone who cannot give it. When I am tired, I will not make final conclusions. When I am ashamed, I will not speak to myself with cruelty. These inner rules become rails for the mind. They keep you from falling off the road when emotion tries to drive too fast. The goal is not to become perfect. The goal is to catch yourself sooner. At first, you may notice emotional momentum after it has already taken over. Then you may notice it halfway through. Then you may notice it at the beginning. This is progress. This is training. This is the mind learning to wake up inside itself. Tonight, as the reset continues, pay attention to what begins before the spiral becomes strong. Notice the first pull. Notice the first heat. Notice the first tightening. Notice the first story trying to form around a feeling. Do not condemn it. Do not fear it. Simply see it. Because what you see early, you can guide gently. And once emotional momentum is recognized before it owns you, the mind gains a power most people never develop. The power to feel deeply without being dragged blindly. The power to pause while the wave rises. The power to choose a response that your future self will not have to recover from. That is how the spiral begins to lose its authority. Not because emotion disappears, but because awareness arrives before emotion becomes king. And once you can recognize emotional momentum before it owns you, another door opens inside the mind. You begin to see that every feeling comes with a thought trying to explain it. Fear brings a sentence, anger brings a sentence, shame brings a sentence, sadness brings a sentence. And if you do not name that sentence clearly, it can dress itself as truth and begin giving orders. This is why the next rare power is not forcing the mind to be empty. It is learning to name the thought without becoming its servant. There is a quiet freedom in being able to say, "This is only a thought." Not because the thought is harmless. Some thoughts feel heavy, some feel sharp, some feel like they know exactly where to press inside you. A thought can enter the mind and make the body tighten. It can turn silence into fear, memory into pain, and uncertainty into a warning. But still, a thought is not a command. A thought is not a law. A thought is not a prophecy. A thought is something that appears, and what appears can be observed before it is obeyed. Many people suffer because they do not separate the thought from themselves. A thought appears saying, "I am not enough," and they do not hear it as a thought. They hear it as identity. A thought appears saying, "Something bad will happen," and they do not hear it as fear. They hear it as preparation. A thought appears saying, "They do not care about me," and they do not hear it as an interpretation. They hear it as evidence. This is how the mind becomes trapped, not by the thought alone, but by the agreement that follows it. The Stoics knew that the first impression is not always yours to control, but your agreement is. A thought may arrive without asking. A memory may rise without warning. A fear may knock before you are ready. But the moment of obedience is different. That is where your power still lives. The thought says, "Follow me." The trained mind says, "Let me first see what you are." That pause is small, but it protects the whole inner life. Naming a thought is the act of removing its disguise. When you say, "This is fear," fear loses some of its authority. When you say, "This is shame," shame stops pretending to be truth. When you say, "This is a prediction," the future stops looking like a fact. When you say, "This is an old wound speaking," the present becomes a little cleaner. You are no longer swallowed by the message. You are standing near it, looking at it. This is not the same as arguing with the thought. Arguing can keep you tied to it. If the mind says, "You will fail," and you spend the next hour trying to prove that you will not, the thought still owns the room. It still has your energy. It still controls the conversation. Naming is quieter. Naming says, "A failure thought is here." Then it stops bowing. It does not need to win an argument against fear. It only needs to stop treating fear as the final judge. There is a deep difference between saying, "I am ruined," and saying, "A ruined thought has appeared." One statement closes the door. The other opens space. One becomes a prison. The other becomes observation. One makes the thought your home. The other lets it pass through like a visitor who does not get to unpack. The brain becomes more peaceful when it learns this kind of language. Not dramatic language, not cruel language, not final language, simple, honest language. A worry is here. A memory is here. A judgment is here. A fearful story is forming. My mind is predicting. My mind is comparing. My mind is trying to protect me through control. These words help the mind stop blending with every movement inside it. A thought becomes dangerous when it is nameless. When it remains hidden, it spreads into everything. You do not say, "I am having a rejection thought." You simply feel unwanted. You do not say, "My mind is telling an old story." You simply feel trapped in the past. You do not say, "This is a fear of uncertainty." You simply feel as if danger is everywhere. But the moment you name it, the thought becomes smaller than the whole world. It becomes one object in awareness, not the master of awareness. This is why naming is not weakness. It is discipline. It is the mind standing at the gate and asking each visitor to identify itself. The Stoic does not let every impression enter with authority. The Stoic asks, "Are you true? Are you useful? Are you within my control? Are you asking me to act with wisdom, or are you only asking me to panic?" Most thoughts lose power when questioned this calmly. They were depending on speed. They were depending on your habit of obeying before looking. A spiral often grows because one unnamed thought gives birth to many others. "They are upset with me" becomes, "I always push people away." Then, "I will end up alone." Then, "Something is wrong with me." Then, "I should have been different years ago." The first thought may have been only an assumption, but because it was not named early, it became a road, and the mind walked far down it. Naming stops the road from becoming endless. It says, "This began as an assumption," and when you see the beginning clearly, the ending can change. To name a thought without obeying it, you must learn to hear the difference between thought and wisdom. Wisdom is usually quiet and clean. It does not need to terrify you to get your attention. It may challenge you, but it does not crush you. It may correct you, but it does not shame you into darkness. It may ask you to act, but it does not demand panic. A fear thought, however, often arrives with pressure. It says, "Do something now. Believe me now. Fix this now. Control this now. Blame yourself now." Urgency is often the mask fear wears when it wants power. This is why the pause matters. When a thought arrives with force, do not rush to obey. Let it stand in front of you for a moment. Let it be seen. You can say, "This is an urgent thought," but urgency is not always wisdom. You can say, "This thought feels strong," but strength is not the same as truth. You can say, "This thought is loud," but loudness is not evidence. These simple sentences return authority to the part of you that can observe. The rare power is not in never having dark thoughts. The rare power is in no longer taking instructions from every dark thought. A person can have a thought of failure and still continue. A person can have a thought of fear and still breathe calmly. A person can have a thought of rejection and still hold self-respect. A person can have a thought of regret and still choose the next wise action. The thought may appear, but obedience is not required. There is a great dignity in this. You stop treating your mind like a ruler and begin treating it like a place where many voices pass through. Some voices are helpful, some are tired, some are wounded, some are protective but confused. Some are echoes from people who once spoke carelessly to you. Some are habits built during seasons when survival mattered more than peace. Naming helps you tell the difference. It allows you to say, "This voice is not my deepest truth. It is only a part of me trying to be heard." And when a thought is only trying to be heard, it does not need to be obeyed. It may need kindness. It may need patience. It may need rest. It may need your attention for a moment, but it does not need the keys to your whole life. This is where Stoic stillness becomes healing. You let the thought come. You name it. You do not panic. You do not follow it blindly. You do not build a story around it. You do not let it choose your words, your sleep, your decisions, or your identity. You simply hold your ground, quietly, firmly, like someone who has learned that inner freedom is not the absence of noise, but the refusal to be ruled by it. Tonight, as this reset continues, practice listening differently. When the mind speaks, do not immediately believe it. When fear rises, do not immediately serve it. When shame whispers, do not immediately become small. Name what is there. This is fear. This is memory. This is pressure. This is an old belief. This is a story my mind is trying to complete. And then wait. Because between naming and obeying, there is a space. And in that space, the spiral begins to weaken. The thought may still be present, but it no longer owns your hands. It no longer owns your voice. It no longer owns the direction of the night. You have seen it. You have named it. And because you have named it, you are no longer lost inside it. That is the rare power, not to silence every thought, but to stand before each one and remember, I can hear you without following you. And after you learn to name a thought without obeying it, you begin to notice something even more important. The mind becomes much harder to guide when the body is tired. A thought that looks small in the morning can feel enormous at night. A worry that would normally pass can suddenly feel like a warning. A memory that should stay in the past can return with a voice that sounds almost alive. Not because the danger is greater, but because your strength to question it is lower. There is a kind of fear that only visits the tired mind. It waits until the body is worn down. It waits until the eyes are heavy. It waits until the room is quiet and the day has taken more from you than you realized. Then it begins to search. It searches for what could go wrong. It searches for what you should have said. It searches for what someone meant. It searches for signs that life is not safe. And if it cannot find danger, it may create one from memory, silence, or uncertainty. This is why many spirals do not begin because something terrible is happening. They begin because the brain is tired and trying to protect you with less wisdom than usual. A tired brain does not see clearly. It becomes more suspicious, more dramatic, more sensitive to tone, distance, delay, and silence. It takes small things personally. It turns neutral things into warnings. It begins to treat uncertainty as danger because it no longer has the strength to hold the unknown calmly. The brain is built to protect life. That is its ancient work. Long before people worried about unread messages, unpaid bills, relationship tension, career pressure, or regret, the brain was trained to look for threat. It learned to ask, what could harm me, before asking, what could bless me? This helped human beings survive. But in a modern life, that same system can become exhausting. The brain may scan for danger even when you are safe in your bed. It may treat a thought like a wild animal. It may treat a memory like a present attack. It may treat tomorrow's possibility like tonight's emergency. When you are rested, your wiser mind has more strength to answer. It can say, this is only a thought. It can say, I do not have enough evidence. It can say, this can wait. It can say, I am safe right now. But when you are tired, that wise part becomes quiet. The alarm part becomes louder. It is like a tired guard at the gate who begins to mistake every shadow for an enemy. The shadows may not have changed. The guard has. This is why exhaustion makes fear feel intelligent. It speaks with confidence. It says, you need to think about this now. It says, you need to prepare for the worst. It says, you cannot sleep until you solve this. And because the body is weak, the mind believes the pressure. It forgets that tiredness can make a thought feel urgent even when it is not useful. It forgets that the night can make problems look larger than they will look after rest. It forgets that not every alarm is a command. The Stoics would not tell you to hate the brain for searching for danger. They would tell you to understand it. The mind is not trying to ruin you. It is trying to protect you with old tools. It thinks worry is preparation. It thinks control is safety. It thinks replaying pain will stop pain from happening again. It thinks that if it can find every possible threat, you will not be surprised. But a life built around never being surprised becomes a life that never truly rests. A tired brain often searches for danger in three places: the past, the future, and other people's behavior. In the past, it searches through old mistakes. It opens memories you have already suffered through. It brings back scenes that cannot be edited. It says, look at this again. Maybe if we replay it one more time, we will finally feel safe. But the past does not become safer because you keep entering it. Some memories need understanding, yes. Some need grief. Some need forgiveness. But many do not need another night of punishment. They need to be allowed to become history. In the future, the tired brain builds disaster before it arrives. It creates conversations that may never happen. It prepares pain that may never come. It asks questions that have no answer tonight. What if this fails? What if they leave? What if I am too late? What if I cannot handle what is coming? These questions sound like preparation, but often they are only fear trying to feel useful. The future cannot be controlled by suffering ahead of time. You do not become stronger by living through imagined pain before real life asks anything of you. In other people's behavior, the tired brain looks for signs: a short reply, a different tone, a missed call, a quiet face, a pause in conversation, a change in energy, and suddenly the mind begins to build a case. They are angry. They are leaving. They no longer care. I did something wrong. The tired mind does not like empty spaces, so it fills them with fear. But silence is not always rejection. Distance is not always abandonment. A delay is not always disrespect. Sometimes people are simply tired too. Sometimes life is heavy for them as well. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes gentle and practical. Before you believe the danger your mind has found, ask one simple question: am I seeing clearly, or am I seeing through exhaustion? That question can save your peace. It reminds you that your state affects your sight. A hungry mind sees differently. A lonely mind sees differently. A tired mind sees differently. The event may be real, but your interpretation may be colored by the condition you are in. The tired brain needs fewer conclusions, not more. It does not need to decide the meaning of your whole life at midnight. It does not need to judge your future while your body is asking for rest. It does not need to solve every relationship while your heart is thin from the day. It does not need to make final statements from temporary weakness. Some thoughts should not be trusted until the body has slept, eaten, breathed, and softened. There is deep wisdom in saying, this is not the hour for judgment. Not every hour is a good hour to think deeply. Some hours are only good for resting. Some hours are only good for silence. Some hours are only good for placing your hand on your chest and reminding yourself, I do not need to solve this tonight. This is not avoidance. This is timing. A farmer does not plant seeds in a storm and blame the soil when they wash away. A wise person does not plant final beliefs in a tired mind and call them truth. The brain searches for danger when it is tired because danger feels more important than peace. Peace feels quiet. Danger feels urgent, and urgency steals attention quickly. This is why the mind may ignore 10 signs that you are okay and focus on one small thing that feels wrong. It is not because the one thing is always true. It is because the tired brain gives more weight to threat than comfort. It thinks fear deserves priority. But Stoicism teaches that what is loud is not always what is worthy. To reset this, you must give the tired brain a different instruction, not a harsh command, not stop thinking. That usually fails. A tired mind resists force. Give it a softer order. We are not solving, we are returning. Returning to the breath, returning to the body, returning to the bed, returning to the present, returning to the simple truth that no amount of midnight panic can improve tomorrow more than rest can. Rest is not laziness. Rest is mental protection. A rested mind can separate fact from fear. A rested mind can choose words with care. A rested mind can remember what matters. A rested mind can carry pain without turning it into identity. But a tired mind often loses proportion. It turns a hill into a mountain. It turns a pause into a threat. It turns one mistake into a life sentence. Rest restores size. It helps life return to its true shape. This is why the 4-hour Stoic reset matters. It is not only about sleep. It is about removing fear from the throne before the mind becomes too weak to question it. It is about teaching the brain that night does not have to become a courtroom. It is about allowing the body to become calm enough for wisdom to speak again. It is about remembering that a tired mind should be cared for, not believed blindly. When the brain searches for danger tonight, do not attack it. Do not say, "Why am I like this?" Do not shame yourself for being alert. Instead, speak to the mind as you would speak to someone who has stood guard too long. Thank you for trying to protect me, but you do not have to search anymore. We are safe enough to rest. We will see more clearly when the light returns. Those words may sound simple, but they carry deep power. They honor the protective part of you without letting it rule you. They calm the alarm without mocking it. They remind the brain that its job is not to keep you awake forever. Its job is also to let you recover. Tonight, the danger your mind searches for may not be danger at all. It may be tiredness wearing a mask. It may be old fear asking for attention. It may be the body begging for rest in the only language it knows. So before you believe the worst thought, check the state of the thinker. Before you trust the fear, notice the fatigue behind it. Before you follow the spiral, ask whether your brain is warning you or simply asking to be held in stillness. Because once you understand that a tired brain searches for danger, you no longer have to obey every alarm it sends. You can listen with compassion. You can pause with wisdom. You can rest without guilt. And slowly, the mind learns that safety is not found by scanning the darkness all night. Sometimes safety begins when you finally stop searching for what can hurt you and allow yourself to be still. And once the mind learns the difference between awareness and overthinking, it becomes ready for one of the deepest Stoic skills, separating pain from panic. Because pain by itself is already heavy enough. But panic comes and adds a second weight. Pain says, "This hurts." Panic says, "This will destroy me." Pain says, "Something is difficult." Panic says, "I will never be safe again." Pain is the wound. Panic is the story that makes the wound feel endless. There is a quiet kind of suffering that becomes worse because the mind adds fear to it. Something hurts, and instead of simply meeting the hurt, the mind begins to run ahead. It asks what the pain means. It asks how long it will last. It asks whether it proves something terrible about you. It asks whether you will ever be the same. And before the original pain can even breathe, panic has already built a whole future around it. This is how many people lose their peace, not only because life hurts, but because the mind begins to treat every hurt as a threat. A disappointment becomes proof that nothing works. A rejection becomes proof that you are unlovable. A mistake becomes proof that you are doomed. A lonely night becomes proof that life will always feel empty. The pain may be real, but panic turns it into a prophecy. The Stoics did not deny pain. They did not pretend that loss, failure, illness, betrayal, fear, or grief were easy. They were not asking people to become cold or emotionless. They were asking people to see clearly. And clear seeing begins with this. Pain is not always under your control, but panic is often shaped by the judgment you place on pain. Pain may arrive because life is uncertain, because people change, because the body grows tired, because plans fail, because love does not always stay the way you hoped, because the past leaves marks. These things are part of being human. But panic begins when the mind says, "This should not be happening. I cannot bear this. This means everything is ruined. This pain is bigger than me." The event hurts once. The judgment hurts again and again. This is why the Stoic learns to ask, what is the pain and what is the panic? That question is simple, but it can divide the storm into pieces. The pain may be, "I feel rejected." The panic may be, "I will always be alone." The pain may be, "I made a mistake." The panic may be, "My whole life is falling apart." The pain may be, "Someone disappointed me." The panic may be, "No one can ever be trusted." The pain may be, "I feel afraid tonight." The panic may be, "Something terrible is definitely coming." When you separate them, you begin to see that panic often speaks in final words. Always, never, forever, everything, nothing. It turns a moment into a lifetime. It takes one wound and stretches it across your entire future. It makes the mind believe that because something hurts now, it will hurt forever. But pain changes, feelings move, the body settles, the meaning becomes clearer. What feels unbearable at night may feel smaller after rest, prayer, silence, or one honest breath. Panic hates patience because patience weakens its control. Panic wants immediate belief. It wants you to accept its darkest conclusion quickly. It says, "Do not wait, do not breathe, do not question. This is danger." But Stoic wisdom steps in and says, "Let me see what is truly here. Not what fear predicts, not what memory adds, not what exhaustion exaggerates. What is actually here?" Often what is here is painful, but not impossible. Heavy, but not endless. Unwanted, but not unconquerable. A difficult conversation, a tired heart, a mistake that can be repaired, a grief that needs time, a fear that needs calm attention, a body that needs rest, a memory that needs gentleness. Panic says, "This is the end." Wisdom says, "This is a moment." There is great power in reducing suffering back to its true size. Panic inflates everything. Stoicism returns things to proportion. If someone does not reply, the fact is simple. There is no reply yet. Panic adds, "They hate me." If a plan fails, the fact is simple. This plan did not work. Panic adds, "Nothing will ever work." If you feel low, the fact is simple. Sadness is present. Panic adds, "I am broken." The Stoic does not let panic write the extra sentence and call it truth. This does not mean you ignore what matters. If something needs attention, you give it attention. If there is a problem to solve, you solve what is within your reach. If there is a lesson to learn, you learn it. If there is a boundary to set, you set it. But you do not hand your whole inner world to panic. You do not allow fear to turn a real problem into a complete collapse of self. Pain asks for presence. Panic demands surrender. Pain says, "Sit with me." Panic says, "Run from me or obey me." Pain can be held gently. Panic wants to command every part of you. Pain may open the heart. Panic closes the mind. Pain may teach you where you need care, change, truth, or rest. Panic teaches nothing clearly because it is too busy shouting. The Stoic way is to meet pain without letting panic become the ruler. You can say, "This hurts, but I will not add a disaster to it." You can say, "This is difficult, but I will not turn it into my identity." You can say, "This moment is heavy, but I will not let my mind decide the rest of my life from it." These are not empty words. They are inner discipline. They are a way of protecting the soul from the second wound. The second wound is what the mind does after the first wound happens. The first wound may be someone's words. The second wound is replaying them until they define you. The first wound may be failure. The second wound is calling yourself useless. The first wound may be loss. The second wound is deciding that joy can never return. Life may bring the first wound without your permission. But the second wound often grows from the way the mind keeps touching the pain with fear. To separate pain from panic, slow the mind down to one honest sentence. Not 10 explanations, not 50 predictions, just one sentence. I am hurt. I am afraid. I am disappointed. I am tired. I miss what I lost. I do not know what happens next. These simple sentences are clean. They do not exaggerate. They do not attack. They do not predict doom. They tell the truth without poisoning it. Then breathe around that sentence. Let it be true without letting it become everything. I am hurt does not mean I am helpless. I am afraid does not mean I am unsafe. I am tired does not mean I am defeated. I do not know does not mean something bad is certain. Pain can be real without being total. You can feel it and still remain larger than it. This is where many people misunderstand strength. They think strength means not feeling pain. But true strength is feeling pain without letting panic take the throne. It is crying without surrendering your wisdom. It is trembling without obeying fear. It is admitting hurt without building a prison from it. It is saying, "This is painful, but I am still capable of choosing my next response." The Stoics believed that between what happens and how we respond, there is a space where character is formed. Pain enters that space. Panic tries to rush through it. Wisdom asks you to stay there long enough to choose. That space may be only one breath at first, but one breath is enough to begin. One breath can stop a sharp word. One breath can delay a harmful decision. One breath can keep a tired mind from believing the worst. One breath can remind you that pain is present, but panic is not your master. As this reset continues, let the mind practice separating the two. When something hurts tonight, do not immediately ask, "What terrible thing does this mean?" Ask, "What is the simple pain here?" Strip away the prediction. Strip away the old story. Strip away the shame. Strip away the future disaster. Come back to the bare truth. The bare truth is usually softer than the panic built around it. Maybe the bare truth is that you are tired. Maybe it is that you wanted comfort and did not receive it. Maybe it is that a memory touched a place inside you that still needs care. Maybe it is that you are facing uncertainty, and uncertainty has always made your mind search for control. These truths may still hurt, but they are workable. Panic is not workable because panic keeps changing shape. It keeps adding fear until the mind becomes too confused to move wisely. So tonight, do not try to erase pain. Pain may be part of what makes you human. But do not let panic turn pain into a storm that owns your whole being. Let pain speak simply. Let it say what it needs to say. Then let wisdom answer. This hurts, but I can hold it. This is hard, but it is not the whole of me. This is uncertain, but I do not have to invent disaster. This is painful, but panic will not guide my response. That is the Stoic separation. That is the quiet blade that cuts suffering down to its true size. And once pain is separated from panic, the mind begins to see something it could not see before. Not every ache is an emergency, not every tear is a collapse, and not every difficult moment has the power to destroy your peace. Because when pain is allowed to be pain, and panic is no longer allowed to become truth, the spiral loses one of its strongest weapons. And once pain has been separated from panic, the mind becomes ready to see something even more hidden. The trigger that starts the spiral is not always the loud thing. It is not always the argument, the mistake, the rejection, the memory, or the fear itself. Sometimes the real trigger is quiet, so quiet that you blame the storm, while missing the small door that opened before it. There is always something beneath the spiral that asks to be seen. Most people only notice the spiral when it is already moving. They notice the racing thoughts. They notice the heavy chest. They notice the urge to check, explain, withdraw, defend, or replay. They notice the fear after it has become a full story. But very few notice the silent trigger underneath it all. The small emotional touch that told the mind, something is not safe here. That trigger may not look serious from the outside. It may be a short reply, a quiet room, a face that did not smile, a plan that changed, a tone that sounded colder than usual, a moment where you felt ignored, a small delay, a memory that passed through the mind like a shadow. To someone else it may look like nothing, but inside you it touches a place that already knows pain, and the mind reacts not only to what happened, but to everything the moment reminds it of. This is why mental spiraling often feels confusing. You ask yourself, why am I reacting so much? You look at the situation and it seems too small to explain the size of the emotion. But the mind is not only reacting to the size of the event. It is reacting to the meaning it has attached to it. It is reacting to the old wound beneath the present moment. It is reacting to the silent message it heard before you could even put words to it. Maybe the trigger is not the unanswered message. Maybe the trigger is the feeling of being unimportant. Maybe the trigger is not the criticism. Maybe the trigger is the old fear of never being good enough. Maybe the trigger is not the silence. Maybe the trigger is the memory of being left alone with emotions no one helped you carry. Maybe the trigger is not the mistake. Maybe the trigger is the shame that says, this proves you are still not safe to trust yourself. The Stoics understood that the mind must be examined beneath the surface. They did not stop at the event. They asked what judgment had been added to the event. They understood that between what happens and what we feel, there is often a hidden belief, and that hidden belief can turn a small spark into a forest fire. A person who believes, I must never disappoint anyone, will spiral when someone seems unhappy with them. A person who believes, if people leave, it means I am not worthy, will spiral at distance. A person who believes, if I fail, I am finished, will spiral after one mistake. A person who believes, if I am not in control, I am not safe, will spiral in uncertainty. The event may change, but the hidden belief keeps producing the same storm. This is why the silent trigger matters. If you only fight the spiral, you may calm down for one night. But if you understand the trigger, you begin to change the pattern at its root. You stop asking only, how do I stop these thoughts? And begin asking, what wound did this moment touch? That question does not make you weak. It makes you honest. It turns your attention from the noise of the spiral to the source of the pain. The silent trigger is often a feeling your mind does not want to admit. Feeling unwanted, feeling powerless, feeling replaceable, feeling unseen, feeling behind, feeling exposed, feeling misunderstood. feeling like you have to earn rest, earn love, earn safety, earn forgiveness. These feelings can be so old that they no longer announce themselves clearly. They simply move underneath your reactions. You may think you are angry, but underneath the anger is hurt. You may think you are anxious, but underneath the anxiety is the fear of losing control. You may think you are numb, but underneath the numbness is a sadness that has been waiting too long. You may think you are overthinking, but underneath the thinking is a need for certainty your nervous system never learned to live without. When the silent trigger is not seen, the mind creates a loud explanation. It says, "They are the problem. The future is the problem. Your whole life is the problem. You are the problem." But often, the real problem is that something inside you has been touched, and instead of receiving care, it has been handed over to panic. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes gentle but firm. The Stoic does not blame the world for every inner movement. The Stoic also does not blame the self with cruelty. The Stoic observes, what happened? What did my mind say it meant? What feeling rose beneath that meaning? What part of this is within my control? These questions remove confusion. They help you see the difference between the event, the interpretation, and the wound. The event may be simple. Someone did not respond. The interpretation may be painful. They no longer care. The wound beneath it may be deeper. I fear being forgotten. Once you see these three layers, the spiral loses some of its power. You no longer have to attack the event with all your fear. You no longer have to believe the interpretation as fact. You can care for the wound directly. You can say, "A fear of being forgotten has been touched." That is very different from saying, "I am being abandoned." One statement creates panic. The other creates awareness. This is the rare discipline of tracing the spiral backward. Most minds only run forward. One thought leads to another, then another, then another. But the trained mind slowly turns around and asks, where did this begin? Not to punish itself, not to replay the whole storm, but to find the first point of contact, the small place where the mind changed direction. Sometimes the trigger is not emotional. Sometimes it is physical. Hunger, fatigue, too much noise, too much scrolling, too much pressure, too little sleep. A body that is overwhelmed can make the mind more vulnerable to spiraling. A tired body makes old fears easier to believe. A stressed body makes neutral moments feel threatening. A restless body makes silence feel unsafe. The mind and body are not separate worlds. They speak to each other all day. This is why some spirals seem to come from nowhere. They may actually come from a body that has been ignored. You have pushed through the day, answered everyone, carried duties, hidden emotions, forced strength, and then at night the mind begins to break apart. The trigger may not be one event. It may be the accumulated weight of not checking in with yourself. The soul can only be neglected for so long before it begins to speak through unrest. The silent trigger may also be transition. The moment after work ends, the moment before sleep, the moment after leaving people, the moment when the house becomes quiet, the moment when there is nothing left to distract you. Many people fear stillness without realizing it, not because stillness is dangerous, but because stillness allows what was buried to rise. Busyness keeps the mind occupied. Silence gives the inner world a voice. And when that voice rises, the untrained mind panics. It says, something is wrong, but sometimes nothing is wrong. Something is simply ready to be felt. The trigger is not danger. The trigger is the absence of distraction. This is why the 4-hour reset is not only about calming thoughts. It is about teaching the mind that silence does not have to become a battlefield. Silence can become a place where the hidden parts of you are finally met with steadiness. To recognize the silent trigger, you must stop judging your reaction too quickly. If you shame yourself the moment emotion rises, you will never understand what it is trying to reveal. Shame closes the door. Curiosity opens it. Instead of saying, "Why am I like this?" say, "What did this touch in me?" Instead of saying, "I should be over this," say, "What part of me still needs care?" Instead of saying, "This is stupid," say, "This reaction has a root." Every reaction has a root. Not every root is true, but every root can teach you something. Some roots are old fears, some are unmet needs, some are habits of protection, some are memories, some are beliefs you inherited from people who also did not know how to be at peace. When you find the root, you stop fighting the branches. The Stoic does not ask, "How can I control everything so I am never triggered?" That would be impossible. Life will continue to bring noise, silence, delay, uncertainty, misunderstanding, and change. The wiser question is, how can I know myself so deeply that triggers no longer own me? This is the beginning of freedom. Not a life without pain, but a mind that knows where pain begins. When the silent trigger is seen, you can respond differently. If the trigger is feeling ignored, you may choose to comfort yourself before demanding proof from others. If the trigger is uncertainty, you may choose to return to what is within your control. If the trigger is shame, you may choose correction without self-cruelty. If the trigger is tiredness, you may choose rest instead of analysis. If the trigger is old grief, you may choose tenderness instead of panic. The spiral wants you to believe the trigger is outside your reach. Stoic awareness shows you that the first act of power is seeing clearly. You may not control what touched the wound, but you can control whether you pour fear into it or wisdom. You can control whether you obey the first story or examine it. You can control whether you fight the emotion or listen beneath it. Tonight, as the reset deepens, do not only watch the thoughts, watch the places they come from. Notice what makes the mind tighten. Notice what makes the heart rush. Notice what makes you feel small, unsafe, forgotten, judged, or behind. These are not signs that you are broken. They are maps. They show you where the mind still needs truth. They show you where the soul still needs steadiness. They show you where old pain is asking not to rule you anymore. And when you find the silent trigger, meet it calmly. Do not turn it into an enemy. Do not turn it into an identity. Hold it in awareness and say, "Now I see what was touched." That sentence alone can stop a whole spiral from becoming bigger, because what is seen clearly does not need to hide behind panic. The mind that understands its silent triggers becomes harder to control from the outside and harder to disturb from the inside. It no longer has to chase every thought to the end. It can return to the beginning and heal the place where the storm first entered. And once the hidden trigger is brought into the light, the spiral loses the darkness it depended on. And once you begin to see the silent trigger behind the spiral, you become ready for another truth that can change the whole direction of your mind. The first thought is not the final truth. The first thought is often only the mind's fastest reaction. It is the old guard rushing to the gate. It is the alarm speaking before wisdom has entered the room. And if you believe it too quickly, you may spend the whole night living inside a story that was never fully true. There is a dangerous moment when a thought arrives with confidence. It does not ask gently. It does not wait for evidence. It enters the mind and speaks as if it has authority. This is bad. You failed. They do not care. You are not safe. You have lost your chance. This will not get better. And because the thought arrives fast, the mind often mistakes speed for truth. But speed is not wisdom. The first thing the mind says is not always the deepest thing the soul knows. The first thought usually comes from protection, habit, memory, or fear. It is built from what the mind has seen before. If you have been hurt, the first thought may be defensive. If you have been disappointed, the first thought may be suspicious. If you have been judged, the first thought may be ashamed. If you have lived through uncertainty, the first thought may be control. It may feel true because it feels familiar, but familiarity is not the same as reality. This is where many spirals begin. A thought appears, and instead of being examined, it is crowned. It becomes the ruler of the whole inner world. One thought says, "Something is wrong," and the mind begins searching for proof. One thought says, "They are pulling away," and the heart begins preparing for loss. One thought says, "You are behind," and the body fills with pressure. One thought says, "You cannot handle this," and the spirit begins to shrink before the challenge has even arrived. But the first thought is not a verdict. It is an opening statement. The Stoic mind knows this. It does not rush to obey the first impression. It waits. It looks. It asks, "Is this true, or is this only my mind reacting?" The Stoic understands that impressions are not commands. They are appearances. They show up. They carry emotion. They may feel strong, but they still need to be tested before they are trusted. A fearful mind often speaks first because fear is designed to be fast. It wants to keep you alive. It does not care if it makes you peaceful. It would rather make 10 false alarms than miss one real danger. That is why the first thought can be so dramatic. It is trying to protect you from pain, embarrassment, rejection, loss, failure, or regret. But protection without wisdom becomes prison. The mind may be trying to help, but if you obey every alarm, your life becomes smaller and smaller. This is why you must give truth time to arrive. The first thought may say, "They ignored me," but time may reveal they were busy, tired, or carrying their own burden. The first thought may say, "I ruined everything," but time may reveal, "I made a mistake," and mistakes can be repaired. The first thought may say, "This feeling will never leave," but time may reveal, "This was a wave, and waves pass." The first thought may say, "I am not strong enough," but time may reveal, "I was tired, not powerless." A calm mind does not accept the first thought as the final truth. It lets the thought stand in the light. It asks for evidence. It separates fact from interpretation. It notices what emotion may be coloring the thought. It checks whether the body is tired, hungry, lonely, tense, or overstimulated. It understands that the condition of the thinker affects the quality of the thought. This is important because some thoughts are not lies, but they are incomplete. They carry one piece of the truth and pretend to be the whole truth. "I am hurt" may be true, but "I will never heal" is panic added to pain. "I made a mistake" may be true, but "I always destroy things" is shame added to correction. "I feel alone tonight" may be true, but "no one cares about me" may be loneliness speaking too broadly. The first thought often takes a real feeling and stretches it too far. The Stoic art is not to reject every thought. It is to refine the thought until it becomes accurate, not cruel, not dramatic, not final, accurate. Instead of "my life is falling apart," the accurate thought may be "one part of my life feels uncertain right now." Instead of "I cannot handle this," the accurate thought may be "this feels hard, and I need to take it one step at a time." Instead of "they do not care," the accurate thought may be "I feel insecure because I do not know what they are thinking." Instead of "I am a failure," the accurate thought may be "I did not get the result I wanted, and I can still learn." Accuracy calms the mind because it removes the poison of exaggeration. The mind can handle difficulty better than distortion. It can face pain more clearly when panic is not changing the shape of it. A problem becomes more manageable when it is named correctly. But when the first thought makes everything sound total, final, and hopeless, the mind loses its balance. This is why the pause after the first thought is sacred. A pause gives wisdom room to speak. A pause allows the body to settle before the mind decides. A pause keeps your tongue from speaking words fear wrote. A pause keeps your hands from sending messages your calmer self would never send. A pause protects your future from your temporary state. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing for a few breaths. Not nothing forever. Just nothing until you return to yourself. The first thought often wants immediate action. It says, reply now. Defend yourself now. Withdraw now. Decide now. Blame yourself now. Give up now. But wisdom rarely screams. It waits beneath the noise. It becomes easier to hear when the first wave has passed. And this is why the Stoic trains in delay. Delay is not weakness. Delay is the discipline of refusing to let panic use your body before truth has been consulted. When a first thought appears tonight, do not shame yourself for having it. The mind will produce thoughts. That is what minds do. Some thoughts will be strange, some will be dark, some will be fearful, some will be old. The goal is not to control every arrival. The goal is to control what receives authority. You do not have to say, "Why did I think that?" You can say, "A thought has appeared. Let me see whether it deserves belief." This changes everything. You move from being a prisoner of the thought to being the examiner of the thought. You are no longer pulled by the first sentence. You are listening for the truer one underneath it. And often, underneath the first thought is a deeper need. The thought says, "They will leave," but the need says, "I want reassurance." The thought says, "I cannot do this," but the need says, "I need rest and support." The thought says, "I hate myself for this," but the need says, "I need forgiveness and correction." The thought says, "Something is wrong," but the need says, "I need calm before I can see clearly." When you understand the need beneath the thought, you stop fighting shadows. You care for the root. This is where the reset becomes healing, not just calming. You are not only pushing thoughts away, you are learning what your mind has been trying to tell you in a confused language. The first thought may be fear's language. The final truth is often quieter. The final truth may be, "I am safe enough in this moment." It may be, "I do not know yet." It may be, "This can wait." It may be, "I have survived hard moments before." It may be, "This pain is real, but it is not my whole life." It may be, "I can choose one wise response." It may be, "I do not need certainty to be steady tonight." Notice how these truths do not deny pain. They do not pretend life is easy. They do not force happiness. They simply refuse to let the first fearful thought become the last word. That is Stoic strength. Not coldness, not numbness. Strength that can sit beside fear and still wait for wisdom. Many people live their whole lives reacting to first thoughts. They build identities from first thoughts. They end relationships from first thoughts. They speak harsh words from first thoughts. They create shame from first thoughts. They lose sleep because of first thoughts. But a trained mind learns to place a small space between arrival and agreement. And in that space, freedom grows. Tonight, as your mind continues this reset, practice one simple movement. When the first thought appears, do not follow it immediately. Let it pass through the room of your awareness. Look at it softly. Ask, are you truth or are you fear arriving first? Ask, are you complete or are you only one piece? Ask, would I believe this after rest? Ask, what would wisdom say if it had a little more time? These questions slow the spiral without fighting it. They stop the mind from turning one fast impression into a whole night of suffering. They remind you that thoughts can be loud, quick, and familiar, and still be wrong, incomplete, or unworthy of obedience. Because the first thought is only the beginning of the conversation. It is not the final truth. It is not the judge. It is not the master. It is not the end of your peace. And when the mind learns to wait before believing, the spiral loses one of its oldest tricks. Fear may still speak first, but it no longer gets to speak last. And when you understand that the first thought is not the final truth, the next discipline becomes clear. You do not have to follow every alarm that rings inside you. A thought may shout, a feeling may rise, the body may tighten, the mind may say, move now, fix now, check now, fear now. But not every alarm is danger. Sometimes it is only an old wound pressing the same button it has pressed for years. There is a moment when your inner alarm sounds so real that peace feels irresponsible. The heart starts beating faster, the mind begins to scan, the body prepares for something. You feel the pull to act, to answer, to defend, to explain, to search, to replay, to control. Something inside you says, if you do not respond to this right now, something bad will happen. And because the feeling is strong, you may believe it deserves immediate obedience. But strength of feeling is not proof of truth. This is one of the hardest lessons to learn because inner alarms do not whisper politely. They come with pressure. They come with heat. They come with urgency. They make the body feel as if life itself is asking for a response. But the Stoic mind learns to ask a brave question before moving. Is this alarm protecting me from real danger, or is it pulling me back into an old pattern? That question is a doorway, because many inner alarms are not responding to the present moment. They are responding to memory. They are responding to fear. They are responding to pain that once taught the mind to stay alert. If someone once made you feel unsafe, your mind may ring the alarm whenever a tone sounds similar. If you once lost something important, your mind may ring the alarm whenever life feels uncertain. If you once felt abandoned, your mind may ring the alarm whenever someone becomes quiet. If you once were judged harshly, your mind may ring the alarm whenever you make a small mistake. The alarm may be loud, but that does not mean the danger is here. This is why discipline is needed. Not the kind of discipline that is cold or harsh. Not the kind that says, stop feeling, but the kind that says, I will feel this without letting it command me. The kind that allows the bell to ring without running toward every sound. The kind that respects the body's warning, but does not hand over the whole mind to it. The Stoics believed that freedom begins when a person stops being dragged by first impressions. An impression appears. This is terrible. Another follows. You must react. Another follows. You are not safe unless you solve this immediately. The untrained mind follows each one as if each alarm is a king. But the trained mind pauses. It says, I hear the alarm. Now let me examine it. That pause is not weakness. It is leadership. The alarm may say, check again. But wisdom may say, checking is not peace. The alarm may say, send the message. But wisdom may say, do not speak from fear. The alarm may say, rehearse the conversation one more time. But wisdom may say, you have already thought enough. The alarm may say, prepare for disaster. But wisdom may say, preparation without evidence becomes punishment. Refusing to follow every inner alarm does not mean ignoring real problems. If a real danger is present, respond. If something needs to be corrected, correct it. If a boundary needs to be set, set it. If a duty is yours, meet it. Stoicism is not passivity. It is clear action without panic. It is doing what is necessary without letting fear add unnecessary suffering. The difference is this: real wisdom gives you direction. False alarm gives you agitation. Wisdom may say, "Call the person tomorrow and speak calmly." Alarm says, "Something is wrong. Keep thinking all night." Wisdom may say, "Prepare what you can." Alarm says, "Control everything that cannot be controlled." Wisdom may say, "Learn from this mistake." Alarm says, "Punish yourself until you feel safe again." Wisdom may say, "Rest now and return with a clearer mind." Alarm says, "Rest is dangerous. Worry proves you care." That last one traps many people. They begin to believe that worry is responsibility. They think if they stop worrying, they are being careless. But worry is not the same as care. Care is clean. Care asks, "What can I do wisely?" Worry asks, "What can I suffer about repeatedly?" Care leads to useful action. Worry often leads to exhaustion. Care respects limits. Worry tries to carry what no human being can carry. An inner alarm becomes stronger when you reward it with obedience every time. If anxiety says, "Check," and you check, the mind learns, the alarm was useful. If fear says, "Avoid," and you avoid, the mind learns, the alarm protected us. If shame says, "Hide," and you hide, the mind learns, the alarm kept us safe. Over time, the alarm becomes more sensitive. It rings faster, it rings louder. It rings over smaller things, not because you are broken, but because the mind has been trained to believe that alarm equals action. To retrain it, you must practice not responding immediately. At first, this may feel uncomfortable. The alarm may grow louder when you refuse to obey it. It may say, "You are making a mistake." It may say, "You will regret this." It may say, "You are ignoring something important." But often, this is only the alarm losing its old control. The nervous system is used to being obeyed quickly. When you begin to pause, it may resist. Stay gentle, stay steady. Do not argue with it for hours. Simply let the alarm ring while you remain rooted. You can say, "I hear the alarm, but I will not move from panic." Those words create space. They let the mind know that you are not ignoring the signal, but you are also not surrendering to it. You are becoming the wise guard, not the frightened servant. You are listening without running. You are watching without collapsing. You are allowing the wave without letting it choose the shore. This discipline is especially powerful at night. Night makes alarms sound louder. The world becomes quiet, and the mind starts hearing itself too clearly. A small worry becomes a signal. A memory becomes a warning. A future possibility becomes a threat. The tired brain begins to treat thoughts like emergencies. But this is exactly when the Stoic reset asks you to practice refusal. Not refusal of feeling, refusal of blind obedience. You can feel fear and still stay in bed. You can feel urgency and still not check the phone. You can feel shame and still speak kindly to yourself. You can feel uncertainty and still refuse to build a disaster. You can feel sadness and still not call your whole life empty. You can feel the alarm and still choose stillness. That is where inner strength is formed. Not when the alarm disappears, but when it loses the power to command your body. A calm mind is not a mind without signals. It is a mind that has learned which signals deserve movement. Some alarms are useful. They remind you to pay attention, to act with care, to protect your values, to correct a mistake, to leave what harms you, or to prepare for what is truly needed. But many alarms are only echoes. They are old fear repeating itself. They are habit wearing a serious face. They are the mind trying to keep you safe by keeping you tense. The Stoic learns to test the alarm with simple questions. What is the actual fact? What story is my mind adding? What is within my control right now? What wise action is needed? What can wait? What would I do if I were calm? These questions bring the alarm down from thunder to information. They do not deny the signal. They examine it. And once examined, many alarms lose their power. They were strong because they were vague. They were frightening because they were undefined. The moment you bring them into clear language, they become smaller. A vague alarm says, something is wrong. A clear mind says, I feel uncertain because I do not have an answer yet. A vague alarm says, you are not safe. A clear mind says, my body is activated, but this room is not dangerous. A vague alarm says, fix everything. A clear mind says, the only thing mine right now is to rest and respond later. This is how the mind is retrained. Through repeated moments of not obeying the false alarm, through choosing calm behavior even while the feeling is still present, through showing the nervous system that urgency can rise and fall without being fed, through teaching the brain that peace is not dangerous. It may not feel natural at first. When you have spent years following inner alarms, stillness can feel like rebellion. Calm can feel unsafe. Waiting can feel like neglect. But that is only because your system has confused tension with protection. The more you practice calm refusal, the more your mind begins to learn a new truth. I can be aware without being controlled. I can be alert without being afraid. I can care without spiraling. There is a quiet dignity in not answering every alarm. It means you no longer let fear choose the shape of your night. It means you no longer give every anxious thought the power to rearrange your peace. It means you no longer treat your nervous system like a master. You treat it like a messenger. You listen, you examine, you decide. And that decision is where freedom lives. Tonight, as this reset continues, let every inner alarm become a chance to practice. If fear rings, pause. If shame rings, soften. If urgency rings, breathe. If uncertainty rings, return to what is yours. If the mind says, you must follow me, answer quietly, no, I will first see clearly. You are not weak because alarms rise inside you. You are human. You have lived. You have carried things. You have learned to protect yourself in ways that may no longer serve you. But now, a new discipline is forming. The discipline of not running every time fear calls your name. The discipline of not obeying every pressure. The discipline of allowing the mind to ring without letting it rule. Because the brain that learns not to follow every inner alarm becomes a safer place to live. The spiral may still knock. Fear may still try to lead. But you are no longer forced to answer every sound. You can hear the alarm, remain still, and let wisdom decide whether anything truly needs to be done. And once you learn not to follow every inner alarm, the next step is even more freeing. You stop treating every feeling like an order, because a feeling can rise with force and still not deserve control. It can press on your chest, tighten your throat, heat your face, or pull you toward an old habit. But that does not mean it has wisdom. It only means something inside you is alive enough to speak. There is a moment when a feeling enters so strongly that it feels like instruction. Fear says, run. Anger says, attack. Shame says, hide. Sadness says, give up. Loneliness says, reach for anything that will stop this ache. Insecurity says, prove yourself. Jealousy says, compare. Hurt says, make them feel what you feel. And if you do not pause, the feeling will not just pass through you. It will take your hands, your mouth, your choices, and sometimes your whole night. But feelings are not commanders. They are messengers. This is one of the most important lessons in Stoic discipline. The Stoic does not hate emotion. The Stoic does not pretend the heart is made of stone. The Stoic simply refuses to let emotion become law. A feeling may deserve attention, but attention is not obedience. A feeling may reveal something, but revelation is not permission to react without wisdom. You can listen to the feeling, understand it, and still choose a response that does not serve the feeling's first demand. Most people suffer because they treat the arrival of emotion as a call to action. They feel anxious, so they start checking. They feel hurt, so they send the message. They feel offended, so they defend themselves immediately. They feel empty, so they reach for distraction. They feel ashamed, so they disappear. They feel afraid, so they begin controlling everything around them. The feeling rises, and the body obeys before the mind has examined what is happening. This is how a spiral becomes behavior. At first, the spiral is only inside, a thought, a pressure, a fear. But once you treat the feeling like a command, the spiral enters the outside world. It becomes the message you regret, the argument you did not need, the decision made from panic, the habit you promised yourself you would leave, the self-judgment that makes healing harder, the silence that punishes both you and someone else, the desperate action that gives temporary relief but leaves a deeper wound. A feeling can be real and still be unwise as a guide. This is where many people become confused. They think, if I feel it deeply, it must be true. But depth of feeling is not proof of truth. You can feel unwanted and still be loved. You can feel unsafe and still be in no danger. You can feel behind and still be on your own path. You can feel like everything is ending and still be standing in the middle of a passing moment. The feeling is real as an experience, but the story attached to it may not be real as a fact. The Stoic mind learns to separate three things: the feeling, the message, and the action. The feeling may be fear. The message may be, something bad will happen. The action may be to overthink all night. But you can stop between the message and the action. You can say, fear is here, and fear is telling me a story. But I do not have to act from that story. That space is where freedom begins, not because the fear disappears immediately, but because fear no longer controls the next step. The same is true with anger. The feeling may be anger. The message may be, I have been disrespected. The action may be to speak harshly. But if you pause, you may discover the anger is protecting hurt. You may discover that correction is needed, but cruelty is not. You may discover that a boundary can be set without burning the whole bridge. Anger may give energy, but wisdom must give direction. Sadness also gives commands when it becomes heavy. It may say, stay in bed forever. Do not try. Do not reach out. Nothing matters. But sadness is not always a prophet. Sometimes sadness is a sign that something mattered deeply. Sometimes it asks for rest, tenderness, or time. If you obey its darkest command, it can make your world smaller. But if you listen beneath it, it may teach you where your heart still needs care. Shame is one of the most dangerous feelings to treat like a command. Shame says, hide, do not speak, do not ask for help, do not try again. You are the mistake. But shame is often a poor teacher. It does not lead you to clean correction. It leads you to collapse. Guilt may say, I did something that needs repair. That can be useful. But shame says, I am something that cannot be repaired. That is not wisdom. That is a wound speaking too loudly. To stop treating feelings like commands, you must first give yourself permission to feel without moving. This may sound simple, but it is rare. Many people panic when emotion rises because they believe they must do something with it immediately. Fix it, explain it, escape it, share it, suppress it, act on it. But sometimes the most powerful response is to let the feeling exist without giving it control. Let fear be felt without running. Let anger be felt without attacking. Let sadness be felt without surrendering. Let shame be felt without becoming small. Let uncertainty be felt without forcing an answer. This is not weakness. This is mastery. The body can carry a feeling longer than the mind believes it can. The feeling may swell, but it will not stay at the same height forever. It may rise like a wave, press against you, and then slowly change. But if you keep reacting every time it rises, you never learn that it can pass on its own. You teach the mind that relief only comes through action. You teach fear that checking saves you. You teach anger that shouting protects you. You teach shame that hiding is safety. Then the next time the feeling comes, it demands the same obedience again. Breaking that pattern will feel uncomfortable at first. The feeling may intensify when you do not obey it. Fear may become louder. Anger may push harder. Shame may whisper more deeply. This does not mean you are failing. It means the old command system is being challenged. The mind is used to getting movement from emotion. When you stay still, the old pattern becomes confused. It asks, why are we not doing what we always do? And that is the exact moment training begins. You can answer the feeling with calm firmness. I hear you, but you will not choose my action. I feel you, but I will not become you. You may stay for a while, but you do not get to lead. This is uncomfortable, but discomfort is not danger. These words teach the mind a new relationship with emotion. You are not rejecting the feeling. You are placing it in its proper seat. A feeling can sit in the room, but it cannot sit on the throne. The Stoic does not ask, how do I stop feeling this? The Stoic asks, how do I act with virtue while this feeling is present? That question changes everything. It means you do not wait to become calm before you become wise. You practice wisdom inside the emotional weather. You choose patience while irritated. You choose restraint while angry. You choose courage while afraid. You choose honesty while ashamed. You choose dignity while hurt. That is real strength. Not a life without emotion, but a life where emotion no longer has the final vote. There is also a hidden mercy in this practice. When you stop obeying every feeling, you stop creating new pain from temporary states. You stop saying permanent words from passing moods. You stop making final decisions from wounded hours. You stop letting one emotional wave decide what your calmer self must later clean up. Many wounds in life are not caused by the first feeling. They are caused by the actions taken while the feeling was driving. This is why the pause is sacred. The pause gives the feeling time to reveal its true size. The pause allows the body to settle. The pause lets the wise mind return. The pause protects your values from being stolen by urgency. Even a few breaths can change the direction of a moment. You may still need to speak, but you will speak differently. You may still need to act, but you will act more cleanly. You may still need to make a choice, but it will come from steadiness, not panic. Tonight, as this reset continues, watch the commands your feelings try to give. Do not judge them. Do not fear them. Simply notice. Fear may command control. Anger may command attack. Hurt may command withdrawal. Shame may command silence. Loneliness may command you to reach backward into places that never gave you peace. Notice each command and then ask, would my wiser self choose this? That question can save you from becoming a servant of the moment, because your wiser self is still there. It may be quiet beneath the emotion, but it has not left. It is the part of you that knows a feeling is not a master. It is the part of you that knows relief is not always the same as healing. It is the part of you that knows a moment of discomfort does not require a lifetime of regret. To stop treating feelings like commands is to become trustworthy to yourself. You begin to know, even when I am afraid, I will not abandon my wisdom. Even when I am hurt, I will not betray my values. Even when I am tired, I will not hand my life to panic. Even when I feel deeply, I can still choose carefully. And once you can feel without obeying, the spiral loses another path into your life. It may still create pressure. It may still send emotion through the body. It may still ask for action. But now you know the truth. A feeling can knock, shout, and shake the door, and still not be allowed to enter as king. And once you stop treating feelings like commands, you begin to understand why the body matters so much. Because the mind does not spiral only in thoughts. It spirals through the chest, the throat, the stomach, the hands, the jaw, the breath. The body often knows you are leaving the present before the mind admits it. And this is why the Stoic practice is not only to think clearly, but to return fully to the body that is still here. There is a moment when the mind leaves the room before the body does. The body may be sitting on the bed, lying in silence, standing by the window, or walking through the house. But the mind is somewhere else. It is in the conversation that hurt you. It is in the future you fear. It is in the mistake you cannot stop touching. It is in the memory that still feels unfinished. And while the body remains in the present, the mind travels through places where it has no power. This is one of the reasons spiraling feels so exhausting. You are not only thinking, you are time-traveling inside yourself. You are asking the body to react to things that are not happening right now. The heart races for a future that has not arrived. The stomach tightens for a conversation that is already over. The jaw locks around words you are not saying. The breath shortens for danger that may only exist in the mind's prediction. The body believes the story the mind is telling. The Stoics knew that peace begins with returning to what is real, and the body is one of the most honest doors back to reality. The body does not live in tomorrow. The body does not live in 5 years ago. The body only lives here. It breathes here. It sits here. It feels the floor here. It hears the quiet here. It carries the weight of this exact moment. So when the mind is lost in fear, returning to the body is not a small practice. It is a way of returning to the only place where your power still exists. A spiraling mind wants to pull you upward into thought after thought. The body brings you downward into contact, feet on the floor, hands resting, shoulders softening, breath entering and leaving, the simple pressure of the bed beneath you, the air touching the skin, the weight of your own body reminding you that you are not floating inside fear. You are here. You are held by the present, even if the mind has forgotten. This is why the first return is often physical. Before you try to answer the thought, find the body. Before you argue with fear, notice where it lives. Before you judge yourself for spiraling, feel the ground. The mind may be too loud to reason with at first, but the body can become an anchor when thought is not ready to become calm. Start with the feet. There is something humble about the feet. They do not debate. They do not predict. They do not replay. They simply touch the earth. When the mind begins to rise into panic, feel the feet as if they are bringing you back from a far place. Let the floor remind you that the present still exists. Let the weight of the body remind you that you are not only a storm of thoughts. You are a living person in a real moment. Then notice the hands. Many people carry fear in their hands without knowing it. The fingers tighten, the palms press, the hands reach for the phone, the face, the blanket, the old habit, the thing that gives temporary relief. But when you notice the hands, you begin to reclaim action. Open them slowly, let them rest. Tell the body, we do not have to grab for control right now. Sometimes an open hand can teach the mind what acceptance feels like. Then soften the jaw. The jaw often holds words the heart never spoke. It holds anger, defense, fear, effort, and hidden grief. A tight jaw can make the mind feel ready for battle, even in a quiet room. Let the tongue rest. Let the teeth part slightly. Let the face stop preparing for a conflict that is not happening. This small release sends a message inward. The war does not need to continue in this moment. Then return to the breath, not as a performance, but as a meeting place. Do not force the breath to be perfect. Do not turn breathing into another task you can fail. Simply notice that breath is already happening. Life is still moving through you without your control. Even when the mind is confused, the body continues. Even when fear speaks loudly, the breath remains a quiet witness. Follow one breath in, follow one breath out. Let it be enough for now. This is the difference between thinking about calm and practicing calm. Many people try to solve the mind from inside the mind. They think more, analyze more, question more, explain more. But sometimes the mind is too heated to heal itself through thought. It needs the body to lead. The shoulders lowering can do what 100 arguments cannot. A slow exhale can weaken what a long mental debate only strengthens. A still body can teach the mind that no immediate action is required. The Stoic practice of returning to the present body is not about escaping pain. It is about locating pain correctly. When pain is unnamed, it becomes the whole world. But when you say, "This is tightness in my chest," it becomes something you can sit with. When you say, "This is pressure in my stomach," it becomes a sensation instead of a prophecy. When you say, "This is heat in my face," it becomes a body signal instead of a command. The pain may still be there, but it is no longer everywhere. This is how panic begins to shrink. Panic says, "Everything is wrong." The body says, "There is tightness here." Panic says, "You are not safe." The body says, "The breath is shallow." Panic says, "You must solve your life tonight." The body says, "The shoulders are tired." The body brings the mind from the unbearable whole back to the manageable part. And once something becomes a part, it can be held. There is deep mercy in this. You do not have to carry the whole fear at once. You can meet it in the body, one place at a time. The chest, the stomach, the throat, the hands, the forehead, the breath. You do not need to ask, "Why am I like this?" You can ask, "Where is this feeling asking to be noticed?" That question is softer. It does not accuse. It listens. The present body also teaches you the difference between real danger and remembered danger. If you are truly in danger, action may be needed. But if you are safe in the room and the body is reacting to a thought, then the work is not to escape the room. The work is to help the body understand where it is. Look around slowly. Notice what is near you: the wall, the window, the bed, the chair, the quiet. Let the eyes return from the inner screen of fear to the outer world of now. The mind can create pictures that feel more powerful than the room itself. It can show you a future disaster, a past humiliation, a feared rejection, an old loss. But the eyes can help interrupt the spell. Look at what is actually here. Not to deny what hurts, but to remind the brain that memory is not the same as danger. Prediction is not the same as reality. A thought is not the same as the room. Returning to the body is also a way of returning to limits. The mind wants to carry everything. The body tells the truth. You are one person in one place, with one breath at a time. You are not meant to solve every problem, heal every wound, understand every person, prevent every loss, and control every outcome in one night. The body brings you back to human size, and human size is not weakness, it is relief. The Stoics often spoke about living according to nature. Part of that means accepting that you are not pure thought. You are body and mind together. You need rest. You need quiet. You need food. You need sleep. You need pauses. You need moments where you stop pushing the nervous system beyond what it can carry. To ignore the body and demand peace from the mind is like refusing water to a plant and asking why it is not green. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is unclench. Sometimes the wisest thing you can do is lie down. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is breathe before answering. Sometimes the most stoic thing you can do is admit, my body is tired, and I must not let a tired body decide the meaning of my life. This is not weakness. This is disciplined care. A neglected body becomes a doorway for spirals. A hungry body makes fear sharper. A sleepless body makes thoughts darker. A tense body makes small problems feel urgent. A restless body keeps the mind scanning. When you return to the body with kindness, you are not distracting yourself from wisdom. You are preparing the ground where wisdom can return. The body is also where acceptance becomes real. You can say, I accept what I cannot control, but if the body is still clenched against life, the words may remain only words. Acceptance becomes deeper when the shoulders drop, when the breath softens, when the hands stop reaching, when the face stops bracing, when the body no longer argues with the moment. The mind may still need time, but the body can begin first. Tonight, as this reset continues, do not try to force your mind into silence. Return to the body and let silence grow from there. Feel the weight of yourself. Notice the breath that does not need to be earned. Let the present moment become simple again. Not easy maybe, but simple. You are here. The body is here. The breath is here. The floor is here. This moment is here. And this moment is smaller than the spiral says. When the mind runs into the future, bring it back through the feet. When it runs into the past, bring it back through the breath. When it runs into fear, bring it back through the hands. When it runs into shame, bring it back through the softness of your own face. Each return is a quiet victory. Each return tells the nervous system, we do not have to leave ourselves to survive this. That is the Stoic practice of the present body. Not dramatic, not complicated, not loud. Just the steady return from thought to sensation, from story to breath, from panic to presence, from everywhere back to here. And once the mind learns how to return to the body, the spiral loses another path. It can no longer keep you trapped only in thoughts, because you have found a doorway out of thought without running away from yourself. You have found the body waiting patiently beneath the noise. You have found the present moment holding a truth the mind often forgets. You are not in every fear at once. You are here. You are breathing. And for now, here is enough. And once the mind learns to return to the present body, it begins to see one of the greatest traps behind spiraling, the demand for certainty. The body may be here, the breath may be here, the room may be quiet, but the mind still reaches forward. It wants guarantees, it wants answers. It wants proof that nothing will go wrong. It wants life to promise peace before it allows itself to rest. But life does not offer that kind of promise, and when the mind demands certainty from an uncertain world, the spiral grows. There is a kind of suffering that begins with one sentence. I need to know. I need to know what will happen. I need to know what they meant. I need to know if I made the right choice. I need to know if the future will be safe. I need to know if this pain will return. I need to know if I will be okay. At first, this sounds reasonable. The mind is not asking for chaos. It is asking for safety. It is asking for something firm to hold. But when the mind believes it cannot be calm until it knows everything, peace becomes impossible. Because certainty is one of the rarest things in life. You can prepare, but you cannot know every outcome. You can love people, but you cannot control their hearts. You can plan carefully, but you cannot control every turn. You can make wise choices, but you cannot guarantee perfect results. You can heal deeply, but you cannot promise that life will never hurt again. This is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to set you free, because much of your exhaustion comes from trying to secure a future that was never fully yours to hold. The Stoics understood this clearly. They knew that life is filled with things outside our control, other people's opinions, the past, the future, timing, loss, illness, chance, change, and the hidden movements of the world. They did not say this to make people hopeless. They said it to make people honest. Because the mind suffers when it tries to command what it was only meant to meet. A spiral grows when the mind keeps reaching for an answer that cannot be given yet. It asks the same question again and again, hoping that repetition will produce certainty. Will this work out? Did I ruin it? What if they leave? What if I fail? What if I never feel normal again? But the mind does not become peaceful from asking uncertain questions in a frightened state. It becomes trapped. The question becomes a wheel. The more it turns, the deeper the groove becomes. This is why searching for certainty can feel like thinking, but it is often fear wearing the clothes of responsibility. It says, I am just trying to understand. But underneath it may be saying, I am trying to remove all risk from being alive. It says, I need clarity. But underneath it may be saying, I do not want to feel the discomfort of not knowing. It says, I am being careful. But underneath it may be saying, I am terrified of being surprised by pain. The mind demands certainty because uncertainty feels open, and an open space can feel unsafe to a wounded mind. If you have lived through disappointment, uncertainty may feel like danger. If you have lost something suddenly, uncertainty may feel like a threat. If people have changed on you without warning, uncertainty may feel like abandonment waiting to happen. So the brain tries to close the open space quickly. It fills silence with meaning. It fills waiting with fear. It fills tomorrow with imagined disaster. Not because it knows, but because not knowing feels unbearable. But the fact that uncertainty feels dangerous does not mean it is dangerous. There is a difference between danger and openness. Danger requires response. Openness requires patience. The untrained mind confuses the two. It treats every unanswered question as an emergency. It treats every unclear situation as proof that something is wrong. It treats every delay as a sign of collapse. But sometimes life is not giving you danger. It is only giving you space before the answer arrives. The Stoic practice is to live in that space without surrendering to panic. This is not easy. The mind wants a conclusion. It wants to close the file. It wants to decide whether to hope or prepare for pain. It does not like standing in the middle. But much of maturity is learning to stand in the middle without falling apart. Not everything will be known today. Not every feeling will explain itself tonight. Not every person will reveal their heart on your schedule. Not every road will show the whole journey before you take the next step. A spiral grows when the mind says, until I know, I cannot rest. Peace begins when the soul says, even without knowing, I can be steady. That sentence is not passive. It does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you stop planning. It does not mean you accept confusion forever. It means you refuse to punish yourself with fear while waiting for clarity. You do what is yours. You prepare what you can. You ask what needs to be asked. You act where action is wise. Then you release the demand to know more than the moment allows. Certainty often becomes a hidden addiction. The mind wants reassurance, then more reassurance, then more. It checks once and feels better for a moment. Then the fear returns. It asks again. It searches again. It replays again. The relief fades quickly because reassurance given to panic rarely lasts. Panic does not want one answer. It wants endless proof. And even when proof arrives, panic asks, "But what if?" This is how the mind becomes tired. It is not only thinking, it is begging reality to remove every possible risk. But risk is part of being alive. You cannot love without risk. You cannot grow without risk. You cannot begin again without risk. You cannot rest without trusting that not everything must be solved first. A life with no uncertainty would also be a life with no mystery, no surprise, no faith, no courage, and no real freedom. The Stoics did not seek certainty in outcomes. They sought steadiness in character. This is a powerful shift. Instead of asking, "Will everything go the way I want?" the Stoic asks, "Can I meet what comes with wisdom?" Instead of asking, "Will they never disappoint me?" the Stoic asks, "Can I remain honorable no matter how others behave?" Instead of asking, "Will I never fail?" the Stoic asks, "Can I learn, adjust, and continue?" Instead of asking, "Will life protect me from all pain?" the Stoic asks, "Can I protect my inner response from being ruled by panic?" This is where certainty becomes unnecessary. Not because life becomes predictable, but because you become more trustworthy to yourself. You begin to believe, "I may not know what will happen, but I know how I want to meet it." That kind of certainty is different. It is not control over the world. It is confidence in your own response. When the mind demands certainty, bring it back to what is certain now, not the future, not the meaning of every silence, not the outcome of every plan. What is certain now? The breath is here. The body is here. This moment is here. The next wise choice is possible. Your values are still yours. Your ability to pause is still yours. Your ability to refuse panic is still yours. Your ability to return to the present is still yours. The spiral says, you must know everything. Wisdom says, you only need to know what is yours right now. This is how the burden becomes lighter. You stop trying to hold the whole road in your hands. You hold the step. You stop trying to force tomorrow to speak. You listen to what this moment is asking. You stop demanding that every uncertainty become an answer before you sleep. You allow some questions to remain open without treating them like enemies. Some questions need time. Some answers only arrive after the body rests. Some truths only become clear when fear is no longer shouting. Some decisions should not be made while the mind is desperate for certainty. A desperate mind often chooses relief, not wisdom. It may choose the answer that ends discomfort fastest, not the one that leads to peace. This is why waiting can be an act of strength. There is deep discipline in saying, I do not know yet, and I will not torture myself for not knowing. That sentence can quiet 1,000 loops. It gives the mind permission to stop digging in dry ground. It accepts the limits of the moment. It makes space for patience. It tells the nervous system, we are not in danger simply because we do not have every answer. And slowly, the mind learns that uncertainty can be survived without spiraling. The fear of uncertainty often comes from the belief that knowing would protect you from pain, but knowing does not always protect you. Sometimes knowing only changes the shape of the burden. What protects you more deeply is inner steadiness, the ability to breathe through not knowing, the ability to act with care without guarantees, the ability to let life unfold without trying to squeeze every mystery into a conclusion tonight. This is not easy work. The mind will still reach, it will still ask, it will still want the final answer, but each time it reaches too far, you can bring it back gently. Not yet. This can wait. I have enough for this moment. I do not need certainty to choose calm. These phrases become anchors. They do not solve the unknown. They stop the unknown from becoming a prison. Tonight, as this reset continues, notice where your mind is demanding certainty. Notice the questions it keeps asking. Notice the answer it wants before it will allow you to rest. Then ask yourself, is this answer truly available right now? If it is not, release the demand for tonight. Not the care, not the wisdom, not the responsibility, only the demand. Let the question remain unanswered without letting it become a storm, because the mind that demands certainty will always find another reason to spiral. But the mind that can live gently with what is not yet known becomes free in a way fear cannot understand. It learns that peace is not waiting at the end of every answer. Sometimes peace begins when you stop forcing life to promise what only your own steadiness can give. And once the mind stops demanding certainty, the next practice becomes unavoidable. Learning how to sit with unanswered questions without turning them into danger. Because life will not always explain itself on the night you ask. People will not always reveal their hearts when you want clarity. The future will not always open its hand. And if your peace depends on having every answer first, your mind will always be easy for fear to disturb. There is a quiet strength in being able to say, "I do not know yet," without falling apart. Most people do not suffer only because they lack answers. They suffer because they believe the lack of an answer is a threat. They feel the empty space and rush to fill it. If someone is silent, the mind fills the silence with rejection. If tomorrow is unclear, the mind fills it with disaster. If a decision is uncertain, the mind fills it with regret before anything has happened. The unanswered question becomes a dark room, and fear starts drawing shapes on the wall. But an unanswered question is not always danger. Sometimes it is only a pause. Sometimes it is life still unfolding. Sometimes it is a truth that has not matured enough to be seen. Sometimes it is a door that will open later, not because you forced it, but because time made the handle ready. The Stoic mind does not need every answer before it can stand. It learns to live by what is available now. Not everything is available now. That is not failure. That is reality. You may not know how someone feels. You may not know how a plan will end. You may not know if the choice you made will bring the result you hoped for. You may not know when healing will feel complete, but you can still know how to breathe. You can still know how to act with dignity. You can still know what kind of person you want to be while waiting. This is where training begins. The brain must be taught that not knowing is uncomfortable, but it is not always unsafe. These two things are very different. Discomfort is a feeling. Danger is a fact that requires action. Many spirals begin because the mind confuses discomfort with danger. It feels the tension of uncertainty and says, something is wrong. But sometimes nothing is wrong. Something is simply unfinished. The brain hates unfinished things. It wants closure. It wants neat endings. It wants the last page before the story is done. That is why unanswered questions can become so heavy. The mind keeps returning to them, not because returning helps, but because the open loop feels unbearable. It asks again and again, what does this mean? What should I do? What if I am wrong? What if I never know? But the more fear asks, the less wisdom can answer. A calm answer rarely rises from a desperate mind. When the brain is desperate for an answer, it often grabs the most painful one. Not because the painful answer is true, but because certainty, even painful certainty, can feel easier than waiting. The mind would rather say, they do not care, than sit with, I do not know yet. It would rather say, I failed, than sit with, this is still unfolding. It would rather say, nothing will change, than sit with, I cannot see the next part yet. Fear prefers a dark conclusion to an open question. But Stoic training teaches the mind to remain open without collapsing. It teaches you to hold a question gently instead of turning it into a weapon. It teaches you that you do not have to answer everything tonight to be safe tonight. You can let the question exist without letting it own your body, your breath, your sleep, or your self-respect. One way to train the brain is to give the unanswered question a boundary. Most people let one question spread across their whole mind. It touches everything. It interrupts rest. It changes the meaning of silence. It follows them into bed. It shapes their mood. But you can say, "This question exists, but it does not get the whole night." That sentence is powerful. It does not deny the question. It simply refuses to let it become a ruler. You may say, "I do not know how this will end, but I will not spend tonight inventing pain." You may say, "I do not know what they meant, but I will not punish myself with guesses." You may say, "I do not know what tomorrow brings, but I know what this moment asks of me." This is how the mind learns containment. The question is held, but not obeyed. It is noticed, but not worshipped. It is respected, but not allowed to take over. Another practice is to separate answer-seeking from answer-forcing. Answer-seeking is wise when the time is right. You gather facts, you ask clearly, you reflect honestly, you take useful action. Answer-forcing is different. It happens when the mind demands certainty before certainty is available. It keeps digging after the ground has already gone dry. It keeps asking the same question without receiving anything new. It mistakes pressure for progress. The Stoic knows when thinking has stopped helping. This is not laziness. This is discipline. There is a point where more thought becomes more suffering. There is a point where the mind is no longer searching for truth. It is searching for relief. And when relief becomes the goal, the mind may accept any answer that lowers fear for a moment, even if that answer is harsh, false, or incomplete. To sit with unanswered questions, you must become honest about what is within your reach. Ask yourself, is there something wise I can do right now? If yes, do it calmly. If no, practice release. Not because you do not care, but because care without control must become trust, or it will become torment. Trust does not mean believing everything will happen the way you want. Trust means believing you can meet what happens without abandoning yourself. That is a stronger kind of peace. It does not depend on life being predictable. It depends on your commitment to remain steady inside what you cannot yet see. The brain learns this through repetition. At first, sitting with unanswered questions may feel almost impossible. The mind may keep reaching for the question. It may try to reopen it every few minutes. It may whisper, "One more thought, one more check, one more memory, one more possible ending." But each time you return to the present instead of following the question, you are teaching the brain a new path. You are saying, "We can be unfinished and still be safe." This is a rare sentence. Unfinished does not mean unsafe. Let that sink into the nervous system. A conversation can be unfinished, and you can still rest. A dream can be unfinished, and you can still live today. A healing process can be unfinished, and you can still be worthy. A decision can be unfinished, and you can still move with care. A season can be unfinished, and you can still breathe inside it. So much of spiraling comes from believing that unfinished things are threats. But many beautiful things are unfinished. A seed is unfinished. A sunrise is unfinished before the full light. A person healing is unfinished. A life-changing direction is unfinished. The mind calls it uncertainty. Wisdom may call it becoming. The practice is to stop demanding the fruit while the root is still growing. When an unanswered question rises tonight, place it gently in front of you. Do not run from it. Do not chase it, just see it. This is the question my mind wants answered. Then ask, can this be answered now? If the answer is no, then say, then for tonight, I will not turn it into punishment. This is how you stop the question from becoming a spiral. Some questions must be carried softly, not solved by force, not buried in denial, carried softly. You can carry a question and still sleep. You can carry a question and still smile tomorrow. You can carry a question and still act with wisdom. You can carry a question without letting it carry you. The Stoic practice is not to remove all mystery from life. It is to become strong enough to live inside mystery without losing your center. This is why the present moment matters so much. The present gives you something the unanswered future cannot give. Contact, breath, choice, action, rest. The future gives possibilities. The present gives power. When the brain asks, but what if I never know? Answer gently, then I will still live by what I know now. You know your values. You know your next breath. You know that panic has not helped you see clearly. You know that forcing an answer has cost you peace before. You know that rest often reveals what pressure hides. You know that not every question deserves your whole mind at once. This is how the brain is trained. Not with one dramatic victory, but with small refusals. Refusing to check again when checking is only feeding fear. Refusing to rehearse when rehearsal has become punishment. Refusing to build endings without evidence. Refusing to call uncertainty danger. Refusing to let a question become bigger than your life. Tonight, let the unanswered things remain unanswered without turning them into enemies. Let the open spaces stay open. Let time do what pressure cannot. Let wisdom arrive when the mind is no longer forcing it. You do not have to hold the whole future tightly to be safe. Sometimes holding too tightly is what hurts. The brain that can sit with unanswered questions becomes difficult for fear to control. It no longer panics at every blank space. It no longer fills silence with disaster. It no longer needs the future to promise comfort before it allows the present to be enough. Because the mind that can say, I do not know yet, and still I can be steady, has already stepped out of one of the deepest spirals of all. And once the brain learns to sit with unanswered questions, the next skill becomes necessary: emotional containment. Because not every feeling needs to be solved the moment it appears. Not every sadness needs to become a confession. Not every fear needs to become a search. Not every anger needs to become a conversation. Some emotions do not need immediate release. They need a safe inner place to be held until wisdom is strong enough to guide them. There is a quiet power in being able to feel something deeply without spilling it everywhere. Most people were never taught this. They were taught two extremes: either explode or suppress. Either say everything while the emotion is hot, or bury everything until the body becomes heavy with what was never spoken. But the Stoic path is not explosion, and it is not denial. It is containment. The ability to hold an emotion with steadiness without letting it break your values, control your words, or take over the whole day. Emotional containment does not mean pretending you are fine. It does not mean locking pain away and calling it strength. It does not mean smiling while your inner world is shaking. That is not containment. That is hiding. True containment says, this emotion is real, but I do not have to throw it into the world before I understand it. It says, this feeling deserves care, but it does not get to choose my behavior without wisdom. It says, I can hold this for a moment without becoming cruel to myself or careless with others. This forgotten skill matters because emotions are powerful when they first rise. They are raw. They are loud. They often speak in extremes. Anger wants immediate expression. Fear wants immediate certainty. Shame wants immediate hiding. Hurt wants immediate proof that it matters, but immediate expression is not always honest expression. Sometimes it is only pain escaping without direction, and pain that escapes without wisdom can create more pain. Think of a cup filled with water. If you shake it violently, the water spills everywhere. But if the cup is steady, the water can be carried without being wasted. Your inner life works the same way. The emotion may be present, the pain may be strong, but steadiness gives it shape. Containment gives it a boundary. Without containment, every feeling becomes an emergency. With containment, every feeling becomes something you can meet, understand, and respond to with dignity. The Stoics understood that the first movement of emotion is not always the problem. The problem begins when the emotion becomes the ruler. A sharp feeling appears, and suddenly the mind begins to justify anything it wants to do. I am hurt, so I can hurt back. I am afraid, so I can control. I am angry, so I can speak without care. I am ashamed, so I can disappear. But virtue is not measured when you feel calm. It is tested when something inside you wants to break the boundary. Containment is the boundary. It is the inner wall that says, this feeling can exist here, but it cannot destroy here. It protects your peace, but it also protects your character, because a person who cannot contain emotion often ends up serving emotion. They speak from the heat of the moment, then regret the damage. They make decisions from fear, then suffer the results. They run from shame, then feel smaller. They chase relief, then lose self-respect. The emotion passes, but the consequence remains. This is why containment is not repression. Repression says, I must not feel this. Containment says, I feel this, and I will hold it wisely. Repression rejects the emotion. Containment gives it a safe place. Repression pushes pain into darkness. Containment brings pain into awareness without letting it take control. Repression creates pressure. Containment creates space. A contained emotion can still breathe. It can be noticed. It can be named. It can be written down. It can be brought before wisdom. It can be spoken later with clarity. It can teach you something. But an uncontained emotion often rushes toward action before it has been understood. It demands movement when stillness would be wiser. It demands a reaction when reflection is needed. It demands a conclusion when the truth is not yet clear. To practice emotional containment, begin by making the emotion smaller than your whole identity. Do not say, I am falling apart. Say, a strong emotion is moving through me. Do not say, I am anger. Say, anger is present. Do not say, I am shame. Say, shame has been triggered. These words create a container. They place the feeling inside awareness instead of letting it become the whole of you. Then, give the feeling a place, not a throne. You may place it in the breath. You may place it in the body. You may place it in a quiet sentence. This hurts. This is fear. This is disappointment. This is a wound asking for attention. The goal is not to make the emotion disappear instantly. The goal is to stop it from spreading into every corner of the mind. An emotion without a container becomes the weather of your whole life. One disappointment colors the entire future. One conflict makes every relationship feel unsafe. One mistake turns your whole identity dark. One lonely night becomes a statement about your destiny. But when the emotion is contained, it stays closer to its true size. It remains painful, but not total. It remains real, but not final. This is the deep discipline of saying, this is part of my experience, not all of my existence. That sentence alone can steady the mind. A feeling may be intense, but it is still only one part of the inner world. There is also breath. There is also awareness. There is also choice. There is also memory of survival. There is also the present body. There is also the quiet self beneath the storm that can watch the storm move. Containment helps you remember that the feeling is not the whole house. It is only one room. Sometimes emotional containment means choosing the right time. Not every truth needs to be spoken while the nervous system is shaking. Not every message needs to be sent while the heart is desperate. Not every decision needs to be made while fear is loud. Containment says, I will not deny this feeling, but I will wait until I can carry it with more wisdom. This waiting is not cowardice. It is respect for the power of words and choices. There are words that, once spoken, cannot be gathered back easily. There are decisions that, once made from panic, create more pain than the feeling that caused them. There are relationships harmed by emotions that needed time, not immediate expression. The Stoic does not rush to release every feeling, because the Stoic knows release without wisdom can become damage. But containment also requires an honest promise to yourself. I will return to this. Because if you contain an emotion only to avoid it forever, it becomes suppression. True containment is temporary holding for wise processing. You are not burying the feeling. You are saying, not in this state, not in this tone, not from this wound. I will return when I can listen without being ruled. This promise builds self-trust. The inner world begins to believe, my feelings will not be ignored, but they will also not be allowed to lead me blindly. That is maturity. That is steadiness. That is how the mind becomes a safe place. A simple practice is to create an inner vessel. When a strong emotion rises, picture it as something you can hold in both hands. Not throw, not swallow, not drop, hold. Then breathe and ask, what does this feeling need from me besides reaction? Maybe it needs rest. Maybe it needs honesty. Maybe it needs a boundary. Maybe it needs comfort. Maybe it needs time. Maybe it needs to be written down before it is spoken. When you ask what the feeling needs besides reaction, you stop confusing release with wisdom. The Stoics would remind you that your highest self must remain in charge even when your lower impulses are loud. This does not make you divided in a cruel way. It simply means there is a part of you that can feel and another part that can guide. The feeling brings information. The guiding self brings judgment. Both have a place. But when the feeling takes over judgment, chaos begins. Emotional containment is especially important during the 4-hour reset, because the quiet may bring up things you did not expect. Old memories may rise. Sadness may loosen, fear may speak, regret may appear. The purpose is not to chase each one into a long mental story. The purpose is to hold what rises in a calm inner space, to say, you are allowed to be here, but you're not allowed to take me away from myself. That is a rare kind of kindness. Most people either fight their feelings or become them. Containment gives a third way. You can welcome the feeling without worshipping it. You can let it speak without giving it the steering wheel. You can respect the pain without letting the pain rewrite your identity. And as you practice this, something begins to change. The mind becomes less afraid of its own emotions. It learns, I can feel anger and not destroy. I can feel fear and not obey. I can feel shame and not vanish. I can feel grief and not become hopeless. This confidence lowers the spiral before it begins, because many spirals are not only fear of the situation, they are fear of the emotion itself. You panic because you do not trust yourself to hold what you feel. Containment builds that trust. Tonight, do not demand that every feeling leave. Do not rush to empty yourself. Do not force calm like a mask. Instead, become a steady container. Let the feeling rise and be held. Let the body soften around it. Let the breath create room for it. Let wisdom stand beside it. Let the emotion be real without letting it become ruler, because the mind that can contain emotion no longer has to fear being overwhelmed by every wave. It can hold what hurts, wait for clarity, and choose what honors peace. And when your inner world has a safe place to place its pain, the spiral loses the power to turn every feeling into a flood. And once emotional containment becomes possible, another hidden truth becomes clear. Many problems do not grow because they are truly enormous. They grow because the mind meets them while it is already empty. Exhaustion changes the shape of reality. It makes a small delay feel like rejection. It makes one mistake feel like a life pattern. It makes one difficult night feel like a permanent condition. The problem may be small, but a tired mind has no room left to hold it gently. There is a certain hour when the soul begins to believe the worst. Not because the worst is true, not because life has suddenly lost all hope, but because the body is drained, the mind is thin, and the heart has been carrying too much without pause. In that state, even a simple problem can feel like it has no ending. A bill becomes a threat. A conversation becomes a disaster. A mistake becomes a sentence. A lonely evening becomes proof that loneliness will stay forever. Exhaustion does not only make you tired, it makes life look heavier than it is. This is why you must be careful with the conclusions you make when you are worn out. A rested mind can see movement. It can say, "This is difficult, but it may change." It can say, "This hurts, but it is not the whole story." It can say, "I made a mistake, but I can repair what is mine." But an exhausted mind speaks in permanent language. It says, "This will always be like this. I will never get out of this. Nothing ever changes. I cannot do this anymore." These sentences feel true in the moment because tiredness has stolen the mind's ability to see tomorrow as different from tonight. Exhaustion makes the present feel endless. That is one of its greatest tricks. It takes the feeling you have right now and stretches it across the future. If you feel sad, exhaustion says, "This is who you are now." If you feel afraid, exhaustion says, "This is how life will always feel." If you feel stuck, exhaustion says, "There is no way forward." But feelings are not weather reports for your whole life. They are movements in the body and mind. They rise, they change, they soften, they pass. Exhaustion simply makes them look frozen. The Stoics understood that judgment changes suffering. The same event can feel different depending on the state of the person meeting it. A strong mind may see a problem as a task. A tired mind sees it as a mountain. A peaceful mind may see a delay as inconvenience. A restless mind sees it as rejection. A steady mind may see correction as useful. A wounded and exhausted mind sees it as proof of failure. The event matters, yes, but the condition of the inner world matters too. This is why wisdom asks you to check the state of the judge before trusting the judgment. If the mind is exhausted, it is not a reliable judge of permanence. It may still notice real pain, real pressure, real problems, but it often exaggerates their size and duration. It cannot easily imagine change because it does not have energy for hope. Hope requires space. Hope requires breath. Hope requires the ability to see beyond the immediate weight. When the body is drained, the mind does not reach far. It crouches under the nearest fear and calls it destiny. A small problem feels permanent when your nervous system is already overloaded. One more thing becomes too much, not because that thing alone is impossible, but because it lands on top of everything else. The unanswered message lands on old insecurity. The small mistake lands on long self-pressure. The unexpected bill lands on months of worry. The sharp comment lands on years of trying to stay strong. So when you react, you are not reacting only to this one thing. You are reacting to the pile beneath it. This is why people sometimes break over what looks small. It is not the small thing alone. It is the tiredness underneath. It is the unspoken burden. It is the long season of holding yourself together. It is the body saying, "I have no more room." This is why you must not mock yourself when a small problem feels heavy. But you must also not let the heavy feeling decide the truth. There is a difference between honoring your exhaustion and believing every conclusion it produces. The exhausted mind often loses proportion. Proportion is the ability to see things at their true size. Without proportion, everything becomes too close. One problem fills the whole view. One emotion covers the whole sky. One fear blocks the memory of every time you survived before. Exhaustion narrows the lens until the mind cannot see context. It forgets your strength. It forgets past recoveries. It forgets that many things that once felt final became chapters you moved through. A Stoic reset restores proportion by returning the mind to simple reality. What is actually happening? What is the fact? What is the story tiredness is adding? What is required now? What can wait? These questions are not meant to create another mental debate. They are meant to reduce the problem back to its real size. The fact may be, "I have a difficult task tomorrow." Exhaustion adds, "I will fail and everything will fall apart." The fact may be, "Someone has not replied." Exhaustion adds, "I am unwanted." The fact may be, "I am behind on something." Exhaustion adds, "I can never catch up." When you remove the extra story, the problem may still exist, but it becomes less permanent. Permanent thinking is one of exhaustion's favorite languages. It uses words like always, never, forever, nothing, everything. These words are too large for most moments. They turn a passing state into a life sentence. They make the mind feel trapped. When you hear these words inside yourself, pause. Do not attack the thought. Just notice the size of the word. Ask, is this really forever, or does it feel forever because I am tired? That one question can loosen the grip of despair. It reminds you that tiredness is not prophecy. There is deep wisdom in refusing to make final conclusions from an empty body. Do not decide that your life is broken when you need sleep. Do not decide that you are unloved when you feel lonely at night. Do not decide that you are incapable when you are overwhelmed. Do not decide that the future is dark when your body is asking for rest. Some thoughts should be postponed, not because they are unimportant, but because they deserve to be examined by a clearer mind. The Stoic does not run from problems. The Stoic chooses the right state from which to meet them. If action is needed, take the smallest wise action. If nothing can be done tonight, do not let the mind pretend that suffering is useful work. Write the problem down if you must. Name the next step if there is one. Then close the inner file for the night. The mind may protest. It may say, "But we need to solve this now." Answer calmly, "No, we need strength first." Strength is not built by draining the last drop of yourself into a problem that cannot be solved in this hour. Exhaustion also makes self-compassion feel undeserved. The tired mind may say, "You should be stronger. You should have handled this better. You should not feel this way." But those sentences only add weight. You do not lift a tired person by placing another burden on their back. You help them stand by removing what does not need to be carried. Speak to yourself like someone who has walked a long road, not with pity, with respect. This feels big because I am tired. I can meet this more wisely after rest. I do not need to turn this moment into a verdict. That kind of language is not soft weakness, it is clear protection. Because the exhausted mind is vulnerable to false permanence, it needs gentle limits. Limit the questions. Limit the conclusions. Limit the replay. Limit the checking. Limit the self-judgment. Do not give tiredness unlimited access to your whole future. Give it care, not authority. Let it tell you, I need rest. Do not let it tell you, nothing will ever improve. There is a strong difference between a problem being unresolved and a problem being permanent. Unresolved means there is no answer yet. Permanent means nothing can change. The exhausted mind often confuses the two. It says, because I cannot fix it tonight, it cannot be fixed. But many things are not fixed in the same hour they are felt. Healing takes time. Clarity takes time. Repair takes time. Direction takes time. A seed does not fail because it is not a tree by morning. The mind must be trained to respect time. Some answers arrive after sleep. Some courage returns after food. Some clarity appears after silence. Some problems shrink after the nervous system settles. Some feelings fade after they are no longer fed by panic. This does not mean every problem disappears with rest, but rest changes the person meeting the problem, and sometimes that is enough to change everything. Tonight, as the reset continues, notice if your mind is using permanent language. Notice if tiredness is making one problem look like your whole life. Notice if a passing feeling has started pretending to be your future. Then gently bring the mind back to truth. This is a hard moment, not a permanent sentence. This is exhaustion speaking, not destiny. This problem may need attention, but it does not get to define me tonight. Let the body be cared for before the mind is believed. Let rest come before judgment. Let silence soften what pressure has made sharp. You do not need to solve everything while empty. You do not need to understand everything while drained. You do not need to make a final meaning from a temporary state, because exhaustion lies by making moments look endless. But when the mind rests, light returns to places that looked closed. The same problem may still be there, but it will no longer look like forever. And that is how the spiral weakens. Not by denying difficulty, but by refusing to let tiredness turn difficulty into destiny. And once you see how exhaustion can make small problems feel permanent, you begin to notice another hidden trap of the mind. It does not only suffer from what is happening now, it also keeps reopening old cases that should have been closed long ago. It brings the past back into the room, places it on trial, calls every memory as a witness, and asks you to sit there as both the accused and the judge. There is a courtroom inside the mind that becomes loudest when the heart is tired. In that courtroom, old pain is never simply remembered. It is argued. It is examined. It is replayed from different angles. The mind asks what you should have said, what you should have seen, what you should have done, why you trusted, why you stayed, why you left, why you did not know better, why you were not stronger. And even when no new truth is found, the trial continues. This is one of the most exhausting forms of spiraling, not because the past is happening again, but because the mind keeps acting as if it can still change the verdict. It brings up old scenes as if there is one more detail that will finally make the pain make sense. One more memory, one more explanation, one more sentence, one more way to blame yourself or blame someone else. But the strange thing is this: the more the mind replays the pain, the less peace it finds. The inner courtroom feels productive because it looks like investigation. It feels like you are trying to understand. It feels like you are searching for justice. But many times, what is really happening is punishment. The mind is not healing the wound. It is pressing on it repeatedly, hoping pressure will become closure. It says, "Let us go over it again." But the heart is not asking to go over it again. The heart is asking to be released from the need to win a case that life has already moved beyond. Old pain often returns when the present feels uncertain, lonely, or quiet. When life slows down, the mind looks backward. It searches the files of memory and pulls out the moments that still carry emotion. Not all memories return because they need action. Some return because they still hold meaning. Some return because they were never grieved properly. Some return because a part of you still wants an apology you may never receive. Some return because the mind still believes that if it can prove who was wrong, the pain will finally loosen. But proving the pain does not always heal the pain. This is difficult to accept. A part of you may want the past to stand in court and confess. You may want the people who hurt you to finally understand. You may want your younger self to have known what you know now. You may want life to give you back the time, the innocence, the trust, the peace, the strength that was taken from you. But the past does not answer like a person. It does not return to the witness stand. It does not explain itself perfectly. And if you keep demanding that it does, you remain trapped in a room where no final answer is coming. The Stoics would not ask you to pretend the past did not hurt. They would ask you to stop handing it the power to keep hurting you in the same way. What happened may not have been in your control. What others did may not have been in your control. What you did not know then may not have been in your control. But how long you continue to sit in the courtroom of self-punishment is something you can begin to question. The mind loves to retry old cases because it fears meaninglessness. It wants pain to have a clear reason. It wants suffering to have a clean explanation. It wants the story to make sense from beginning to end. But some pain is messy. Some people act from their own wounds. Some moments happen because of ignorance, fear, selfishness, immaturity, timing, weakness, or chance. Not every wound gives you a perfect answer, and when the mind cannot find a perfect answer, it may keep replaying the case forever. This is where Stoic freedom begins, not by finding every answer, but by deciding that your peace will not depend on every answer. The inner courtroom often has a harsh prosecutor. That voice inside you does not ask gentle questions. It attacks. It says, "You should have known. You were foolish. You ruined it. You let it happen. You should have acted sooner. You should have been different." This voice pretends to be wisdom, but it is often shame wearing a serious robe. True wisdom corrects without cruelty. Shame condemns without teaching. If the voice inside you leaves you clearer, it may be wisdom. If it leaves you smaller, trapped and heavy, it may only be old pain looking for someone to punish. You cannot heal by becoming cruel to the version of yourself that survived what you did not yet understand. That younger version of you had less information, less strength, less language, less support, less distance. Maybe they were afraid. Maybe they were hopeful. Maybe they were trying to be loved. Maybe they were doing the best they could with the mind they had at the time. The inner courtroom forgets this. It judges the past with present wisdom. It uses what you know now to attack who you were then. But that is not justice. That is unfairness turned inward. A Stoic mind learns to review the past without being ruled by it. Reviewing is different from replaying. Reviewing asks, "What can I learn?" Replaying asks, "How can I suffer again?" Reviewing brings a lesson forward. Replaying drags the whole wound back. Reviewing ends with a clearer step. Replaying ends with more exhaustion. Reviewing respects the past as a teacher. Replaying turns the past into a prison guard. When old pain returns, ask yourself, am I learning or am I reliving? This question cuts through the courtroom noise. If there is a lesson, take it. If there is a boundary, honor it. If there is a truth, accept it. If there is grief, let it be felt with kindness. But if the mind is only replaying the same scene to punish you, you are allowed to step out of the courtroom. You are allowed to say, "This case has taught me what it can." You are allowed to say, "I will not use the past as a weapon against myself tonight." You are allowed to say, "I can honor what hurt without keeping the trial open forever." This does not mean forgiveness must be forced. It does not mean trust must be restored. It does not mean the past was okay. It means the old pain no longer gets unlimited access to your present mind. It means you stop letting memory walk in at any hour, take the judge's seat, and sentence you again. Some memories need mourning, not arguing. This is a rare truth. The mind argues when the heart needs to grieve. It asks why, when the deeper need is to finally say, "That hurt me. That changed me. That was heavy. I wish it had been different." Grief is softer than mental trial. Grief does not try to rewrite the event. It lets the truth be felt without forcing it to become a debate. Sometimes peace comes not from solving the old pain, but from allowing yourself to stop defending against the fact that it mattered. The Stoic practice here is to take the lesson and release the trial. What did this pain teach you about boundaries, about trust, about your needs, about your strength, about what you will no longer abandon in yourself, about what belongs to you and what never did? Once the lesson is taken, the endless replay becomes unnecessary. You do not need to keep drinking bitterness to prove the wound was real. The wound was real. Now the question is whether your present life must keep paying for it. The inner courtroom also keeps old pain alive by making you identify with the verdict. It says, "Because this happened, this is who you are." But an event is not an identity. A wound is not a name. A mistake is not a life sentence. A betrayal is not proof that you are foolish. A rejection is not proof that you are unworthy. A season of weakness is not proof that strength is gone. The past shaped you, but it does not get to define the final truth of you. Tonight, as this reset continues, notice if your mind has opened an old case. Notice if it is calling memories forward, asking the same questions, demanding a verdict that will never satisfy the heart. Do not fight it with anger. Simply stand up inside yourself and say, "I see the courtroom. I know this place, but I do not have to sit here all night." Return to the breath. Return to the body. Return to the present. Let the old scene fade back into history. Not because it meant nothing, but because it no longer gets to own everything. Because the mind that stops retrying old pain begins to reclaim its future. It no longer spends its strength arguing with what cannot answer. It no longer mistakes self-punishment for understanding. It no longer keeps wounds open just to prove they existed. And slowly, gently, the inner courtroom grows quiet. Not because the past was erased, but because peace finally stopped asking the past for permission to begin. And once the inner courtroom grows quiet, another old habit begins to reveal itself. The mind has been defending you even when no one is attacking. It replays conversations. It prepares speeches. It argues with people who are not in the room. It explains your heart to imaginary judges. It tries to prove your innocence to memories that cannot hear you. And slowly, without noticing, you become tired, not from life itself, but from constantly defending yourself inside your own head. There is a kind of exhaustion that comes from being on trial in your own mind. You may be lying in silence, but inside you are explaining. You are telling someone why you did what you did. You are correcting what they misunderstood. You are proving you were not selfish, not weak, not foolish, not careless, not cruel. You are answering accusations no one is speaking in that moment. You are creating perfect replies to arguments that already ended or may never happen. The body is still, but the mind is standing before a crowd, trying to be believed. This inner defense feels necessary at first. It feels like protection. It feels like justice. It feels like you are finally saying what you should have said. But after a while, it becomes a prison. Because every defense keeps the accusation alive. Every imaginary explanation keeps you tied to the person, the moment, or the judgment you are trying to escape. The mind says, "Let me defend you so you can be free." But freedom does not come from winning arguments that exist only inside your head. The Stoics understood that a person loses peace when they become too dependent on being understood by everyone. The need to be seen correctly can become a chain. Of course, it hurts to be misunderstood. Of course, it hurts when people judge your actions without knowing your pain, your motives, your limits, or your story. But if your peace depends on correcting every false picture of you, then anyone's opinion can become your master. This is where inner defense begins. Someone forms an opinion, or you fear they have formed one, and the mind starts working. It says, "They must know the truth. They must understand me. They must see that I had a reason. They must know I am not who they think I am." But not every mind is open enough to receive your truth. Not every person is honest enough to judge you fairly. Not every situation can be repaired by more explanation. Sometimes the more you defend yourself, the more you hand your peace to people who were never careful with it. Defending yourself inside your head often comes from the fear of being wrongly defined. A person says something, or you imagine what they might think, and suddenly the mind feels threatened. It is not only the comment that hurts, it is the fear that their version of you will become the final version. So the mind fights back internally. It builds a case. It collects evidence. It prepares words. It wants to protect your identity from being stolen by another person's misunderstanding. But your identity does not live in their mind. That is the first freedom. You are not what someone failed to see. You are not what someone decided during their anger. You are not what someone said when they were hurt, proud, jealous, confused, or careless. You are not the small version of you that someone carries because they never took time to know the whole. Their thought may be loud in your mind, but it is not the truth of your being. The Stoic practice is to return your identity to your own character, not to their opinion, not to their mood, not to their memory, not to their story. Your character is shown in what you choose, what you correct, what you value, what you practice, how you act when no one praises you, and how you return when you fall short. If your conscience is clear, or if you are honestly willing to repair what is yours, then endless internal defense becomes unnecessary. There is a difference between accountability and self-defense. Accountability says, "Let me look honestly at my part." Self-defense says, "Let me prove I had no part." Accountability is calm enough to learn. Self-defense is frightened of being condemned. Accountability leads to growth. Self-defense often leads to more mental noise. The Stoic does not avoid responsibility, but the Stoic also does not accept false guilt just to keep peace with someone else's judgment. To stop defending yourself inside your head, begin by asking, is there something real for me to correct? If yes, correct it. Apologize if needed. Change the behavior if needed. Learn the lesson. Make the repair that belongs to you. But if you have already done what is yours, or if the accusation is only imagined, or if the person is committed to misunderstanding you, then the inner defense must end. Not because you lost, because the trial is no longer worthy of your life. Many people keep defending themselves because they confuse silence with guilt. They think, if I stop explaining, it means they were right. No. Sometimes silence means you have chosen peace over performance. Sometimes silence means you are no longer begging to be interpreted kindly by someone determined to read you harshly. Sometimes silence means you trust your life to speak over time. Sometimes Silence means you do not need to keep dragging your soul back into the same argument. This is not weakness, this is restraint. There are explanations that bring clarity, and there are explanations that only feed the fire. A wise explanation is given once, calmly, to someone capable of hearing it. An anxious explanation is repeated again and again, hoping to force understanding out of someone who may not want it. When you keep defending yourself to an imagined audience, ask, am I seeking truth or am I seeking relief from the discomfort of being misunderstood? That question reveals the pattern. The discomfort of being misunderstood is real. It touches something deep. Most human beings want to be known fairly. We want our intentions to matter. We want our pain to be considered. We want people to see the full picture before they judge. But life will not always give that. Some people will only see the part that supports their story. Some will judge from distance. Some will hear you through their own wounds. Some will need you to be wrong so they do not have to examine themselves. If you spend your life defending yourself to every incomplete view, you will never rest. The Stoic learns to let some people be wrong, not with bitterness, not with pride, with freedom. Let them misunderstand what they are not willing to understand. Let them carry a version of you that is too small. Let them think what their state of mind allows them to think. This does not mean you stop valuing truth. It means you stop sacrificing your peace to control another person's perception. A person's opinion is outside your control. Your conduct is within your control. Your honesty is within your control. Your effort to repair is within your control. Your refusal to become cruel is within your control. Your willingness to remain dignified is within your control. But whether someone accepts your explanation, believes your heart, or changes their view is not fully yours. When you forget this, you become trapped in mental arguments that have no end. The inner defense also appears when you are ashamed of your own past. You may not be arguing with another person. You may be arguing with yourself. You keep explaining why you were the way you were, why you stayed, why you trusted, why you failed, why you reacted, why you did not know better. But sometimes the mind does not need another defense. It needs compassion and correction. It needs to say, I understand why I acted from that place, and I am choosing differently now. You do not have to keep proving your old self was innocent before you are allowed to grow. Growth does not require a perfect past. It requires honesty. It requires humility. It requires the courage to stop hiding behind explanations while also refusing to drown in shame. You can say, I had reasons, but I also have responsibility. You can say, I was hurt, but I still want to heal how I respond. You can say, I did not know then, but I am learning now. These sentences are clean. They do not defend endlessly. They release you into maturity. Defending yourself inside your head becomes addictive because it gives the mind a false sense of control. You cannot control what happened. You cannot control what they think. You cannot control whether the past is remembered fairly. But inside your mind, you can keep winning the argument. You can keep delivering the perfect speech. You can keep making your case. For a moment it feels powerful, but afterward you feel drained because nothing has truly changed. You only rehearsed pain with better words. The way out is to stop seeking imaginary victory. When the inner argument begins, name it. I am defending myself again, not with shame, just with clarity. Then ask, who am I trying to convince? If the person is not present, if the conversation is not happening, if no useful action can be taken now, then the defense is not serving truth. It is serving anxiety. Bring yourself back. I do not need to win this in my head. I have nothing to prove in this empty room. My peace is not waiting for an imaginary judge to approve me. This is a powerful moment. The mind may resist. It may say, "But they need to understand." Answer gently, "Maybe, but not tonight inside my head." It may say, "But they were wrong." Answer, "Perhaps, but replaying it is hurting me now." It may say, "But I need closure." Answer, "Closure will not come from another imaginary trial." The Stoic closes the courtroom by returning to action. If there is something to do it in real life with calm courage. If there is nothing to do, stop performing in the mind. Life is not lived in imagined conversations. Healing is not found in perfect speeches no one hears. Peace is not built by rehearsing defense until the heart is exhausted. Peace is built by choosing what is yours and releasing what is not. Sometimes the strongest sentence is, "I know my heart, and I will live in a way that proves it over time." Not prove it through panic. Not prove it through begging. Not prove it through endless explanation. Prove it through steady conduct, through patience, through honesty, through self-respect, through not becoming what hurt you, through learning where you were wrong and standing firm where you were not. Let time become your witness. Let character become your defense. Let peace become more important than being understood by every person. Tonight, as this reset continues, notice the arguments you keep having with people who are not here. Notice the explanations you keep giving to silence. Notice the accusations you keep answering in your own mind. Then let the body soften. Let the mouth rest. Let the shoulders drop. You do not have to defend yourself to the ceiling. You do not have to explain your whole life to the dark. You do not have to stand trial every time memory calls your name. If something is yours, meet it with courage. If something is not yours, release it with dignity. If someone misunderstands you, speak once where wisdom allows, then let your life continue. If your own mind accuses you, answer with truth, not cruelty. And if there is no real court, no real question, no real action to take, step out of the trial. Because the mind that stops defending itself inside itself finally has room to rest. It no longer spends its nights proving its worth to shadows. It no longer treats every imagined judgment as a summons. It no longer burns its strength trying to control how every story is told. And slowly, something quiet returns. Not the need to be seen by everyone, but the peace of knowing you have returned to yourself. And once you stop defending yourself inside your own head, a deeper silence becomes possible. Because the mind no longer needs to finish every argument, prove every point, solve every fear, or complete every painful story. It can finally learn a rare art that most people never practice, letting a thought pass unfinished, not answered, not defeated, not explained, just noticed and released before it becomes another room you are trapped inside. There is a strange discomfort in leaving a thought unfinished. The mind wants closure. It wants the last word. It wants the full explanation. It wants to know where the thought came from, what it means, why it returned, whether it is true, and what should be done about it. A thought appears, and immediately the mind wants to chase it to the end. But some thoughts do not have a useful end. Some thoughts are only doors back into old loops. Some thoughts are not invitations to wisdom, they are invitations to exhaustion. A thought may rise and say, "What if everything goes wrong?" And before you know it, the mind starts building the whole disaster. One scene becomes another. One fear becomes a future. One question becomes a night without rest. But the thought did not need to be completed. It did not need a full story. It could have been allowed to pass while still unfinished. It could have remained only a passing sound inside the mind, not a whole world you had to enter. This is hard because the brain believes unfinished thoughts are unsafe. It treats them like open doors, unresolved files, and loose ends that must be tied before peace is allowed. But not every loose end is your responsibility tonight. Not every thought deserves completion. Some thoughts are like sparks floating in the air. If you leave them alone, they fade. If you grab them, study them, and feed them with attention, they become fire. The Stoic understands that attention is a form of permission. What you keep following, you keep strengthening. What you keep completing, you keep training the mind to repeat. If every fearful thought receives a full investigation, the brain learns that fear is important. If every painful memory receives a whole trial, the brain learns that memory is still in charge. If every doubt receives an hour of analysis, the brain learns that doubt can own your time whenever it wants. Letting a thought pass unfinished is not ignorance. It is discipline. It is the discipline of saying, "This does not need my full attention." It is the discipline of recognizing when a thought is not leading to clarity, only more hunger. It is the discipline of refusing to turn every mental visitor into a permanent guest. The mind may say, "But we have not finished thinking about this." Wisdom says, "We have finished enough for tonight." That sentence can protect you from many spirals, because spirals grow through completion. The mind wants to complete the fear. It wants to complete the argument. It wants to complete the memory. It wants to complete the imagined future. It wants to know the ending before the ending exists. But when you refuse to complete the thought, the spiral loses its next step. It stands there waiting for your attention, and you quietly withdraw the fuel. A thought may begin, "Maybe I should have," and you do not have to follow it into an hour of regret. A thought may begin, "What if they think?" and you do not have to follow it into imaginary judgment. A thought may begin, "What if I never?" and you do not have to follow it into a future that has not been written. A thought may begin, "If only I had," and you do not have to follow it into a past that cannot be edited. You can let the sentence remain incomplete. This feels unnatural at first. The mind may protest. It may say, "We need to finish this," but ask gently, "Finish it for what?" Will finishing this thought bring wisdom, or will it bring more tension? Will it guide a real action, or will it only reopen a wound? Will it help you sleep, repair, understand, or grow? Or will it only give fear another chance to sound important? Many thoughts pretend to be unfinished because they want another turn. They do not want truth. They want attention. They come back with different words, but the same emotional hunger. Think about me again. Replay me again. Fear me again. Prove yourself again. Punish yourself again. The art is learning to see the pattern beneath the sentence. The thought may be new in wording, but old in direction. If it always leads to shame, you do not have to complete it. If it always leads to panic, you do not have to complete it. If it always leads to imaginary arguments, you do not have to complete it. If it always leads to hopelessness without a wise next step, you do not have to complete it. This does not mean you avoid every hard thought. Some thoughts deserve attention. A thought that says, "I need to apologize," may need action. A thought that says, "This boundary is being crossed," may need courage. A thought that says, "I am tired and need rest," may need care. A thought that says, "This pattern is hurting me," may need honest change, but a useful thought usually points toward a clean next step. A spiraling thought only keeps asking for more of you without giving anything back. The Stoic learns to test the thought by its fruit. What does this thought produce when followed? Does it produce clarity? Does it produce courage? Does it produce responsibility? Does it produce peace? Or does it produce confusion, pressure, shame, and fear? A tree is known by its fruit. A thought can be known the same way. If a thought has proven again and again that it leads nowhere good, you are allowed to let it pass unfinished. This is a rare form of self-respect. It says, "My attention is valuable." It says, my peace is not open to every passing fear. It says, my mind is not a public road where every thought can travel as long as it wants. It says, I can choose what receives my inner energy. At night, this becomes even more important. The tired mind has a habit of starting thoughts it cannot finish wisely. It opens the past when the body needs sleep. It opens the future when no action can be taken. It opens other people's hearts when they are not present to explain themselves. It opens old mistakes when there is no repair to make at that hour. Then it demands that you keep thinking until peace appears. But peace rarely appears at the end of a tired spiral. Peace appears when the mind stops granting the spiral another beginning. Letting a thought pass unfinished may feel like leaving a room while someone is still speaking, but some voices inside you do not deserve the full meeting. Fear will keep talking if you keep sitting down. Shame will keep presenting evidence if you keep listening. Regret will keep reopening the file if you keep signing your name at the bottom. You are allowed to stand up. You are allowed to say, not now. You are allowed to say, this thought does not need completion. You are allowed to say, I will not follow this where it wants to take me. You are allowed to say, I can let this pass without solving it. This is not running away. Running away is when you avoid what must be faced. Wisdom is when you refuse what only wants to consume you. There is a difference. Avoidance leaves real duties undone. Release leaves useless suffering unfed. Avoidance hides from truth. Release stops chasing noise. Avoidance weakens character. Release protects it. The mind becomes peaceful when it learns that not every thought needs an ending. A cloud does not need an ending. It passes. A sound does not need an ending. It fades. A wave does not need an explanation. It rises and falls. Many thoughts can be treated the same way. They appear, they move, they dissolve. You do not need to attach a story to each one. The problem is that the mind often grabs a thought and says, what does this say about me? A strange thought appears, and you fear your own mind. A painful thought appears, and you treat it as identity. A fearful thought appears, and you treat it as prophecy. But a thought appearing does not mean anything final about you. It means the mind produced a thought. That is all. The deeper question is not, why did this appear? The deeper question is, will I feed it? This is where your freedom becomes practical. When a thought appears tonight, notice the first pull. Does it want to take you into fear? Does it want to make you replay? Does it want to force certainty? Does it want to make you defend yourself again? If yes, do not wrestle it. Do not insult it. Do not spend 10 minutes explaining why it is wrong. Simply let it remain unfinished. Bring attention back to the breath, the body, the quiet around you. Let the thought lose momentum from neglect. Neglect can be holy when what you are neglecting is fear's invitation. The thought may return. That is normal. Let it pass again. It may return with a different costume. Let it pass again. It may say, but this matters. You can answer, if it truly matters, wisdom will return with it when I am clear. Panic does not need to handle it tonight. That answer gives the mind a boundary without cruelty. Over time, the brain learns. It learns that not every opening must become a hallway. It learns that unfinished does not mean dangerous. It learns that a thought can knock without being welcomed. It learns that attention is a choice, and the more this becomes familiar, the less power spirals have to build themselves. This is one of the quietest forms of Stoic mastery. No one sees it. No one praises it. There is no dramatic victory outside. But inside, something powerful happens. A thought comes to take you away, and you remain. A fear comes to start a story, and you do not write the next line. A memory comes to reopen the courtroom, and you do not sit down. A worry comes asking for the whole night, and you give it nothing but awareness. Tonight, let some thoughts be unfinished. Let some questions remain unopened. Let some fears die from lack of attention. Let some old stories lose their audience. You do not have to complete every sentence the mind begins. You do not have to walk every road the brain points toward. You do not have to reach the end of every thought to be free from it. Sometimes freedom begins in the middle. In the middle of a fear, you stop. In the middle of an old argument, you return. In the middle of a painful memory, you breathe. In the middle of a thought that once owned you, you quietly choose not to continue. That is the rare art. Not finishing what does not deserve your life. Not giving fear the satisfaction of a full story. Not letting the mind pull you to the edge simply because it began walking there. Because the mind that can let a thought pass unfinished has learned something fear never wanted it to know. You do not have to follow a thought to its end before you are allowed to return to peace. And now, as this reset comes to an end, remember what your mind has been learning in the quiet. A spiral does not own you the moment it begins. There is always a hidden doorway before the storm, a first thought, a small tightening, a repeated fear, a silent trigger, a tired brain searching for danger. And once you learn to see these moments clearly, you are no longer dragged through them blindly. You have learned that repetition is not truth, that the first thought is not the final truth, that feelings are not commands, that pain does not have to become panic, that unanswered questions do not have to become prisons, that old wounds may rise in silence, but they do not have to rule the night. You have learned that stillness is not weakness. Stillness is how the mind stops feeding chaos. The Stoic reset is not about becoming a person who never feels fear, sadness, regret, pressure, or uncertainty. It is about becoming someone who can feel these things without surrendering the whole inner world to them. Someone who can notice the alarm without running, hold emotion without spilling it everywhere, reflect without attacking the self, let a thought pass unfinished, return to the body, return to the breath, return to what is real. Because peace is not found by winning every battle inside your head. Peace begins when you stop entering every battle the mind invites you into. So tonight, let the old storm know something has changed. You are no longer the person who follows every thought to the end. You are no longer the person who believes every fear because it speaks loudly. You are no longer the person who lets one tired hour decide the meaning of an entire life. You can pause now. You can observe now. You can choose now. And even if the mind spirals again, it will not find the same old obedience waiting for it. It will meet awareness. It will meet patience. It will meet the quiet strength of someone who has learned how to come back home to themselves. If this reset spoke to a part of you that has been tired for too long, leave a comment with the words, "I choose stillness." Let it be your quiet reminder that not every thought deserves your peace. And if you want more calm, deep, stoic resets like this, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, so each night can become another step back to yourself.